Chapter 463. Just like that, 3 days passed. On the way back to his room, Noah touched his arm while frowning and hissing in pain. If one were to look closely, they would notice that there was a tear on Noah's arm. Blood was still dripping from it, but there was no wound. No, it should be said that the original wound had already healed under Noah's regenerative ability that was strengthened countless times by the protozoan virus. All that was left were the cracks in his clothes, traces of blood, and some residual pain on his body. Of course, if it was just an ordinary injury, the degree of a cut on the arm would not be enough to make Noah show pain. The reason why he was still like this was mainly because the sword that cut Noah was not an ordinary sword. Noah gritted his teeth when he recalled the scene of Tony using the lacerating silver hand, with a cheerful expression and swinging the sword at him with a sunny smile on his face. That hateful guy. Once he enters battle mode, he can't hold back at all. He doesn't know how to hold back at all. 3 days ago, under Tony's persuasion, Noah finally decided to slay a god. Since he had decided to fight against a terrifying opponent who could rival Tony, Noah naturally had to make more preparations. Instead of saying that it was preparation, in fact, Noah just asked Tony to order a gymnasium around the hotel to be reserved, and then asked Tony to accompany him for training. Noah did this not because he wanted to make a last-minute effort, but because he wanted to get used to fighting against opponents of the level of the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience. When a person stayed in a dark place for a long time, their eyes would gradually adapt to the darkness. When a person stayed in a warm place for a long time, their body would gradually adapt to the high temperature. It was the same principle. If Noah were to fight against a high-level opponent like Tony, he would be able to adapt to the battle rhythm of the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience. Thus, he would be able to better display his strength. As it turned out, this method was indeed effective. The long-distance slash that Tony used with the demon sword's authority could not be blocked, nor could it be seen with the naked eye. Although Noah's senses could detect Tony's long-range slash, Tony's slash was too fast. Even if he could detect it, Noah's body would not be able to keep up. This was also the reason why Noah had no choice but to block Tony's demon sword, even though he knew it would be terrible if he chose to block it. Instead, he relied on Bio to withstand Tony's demon sword. And now, after 3 days of training with Tony, Noah was gradually able to adapt to the speed of Tony's demonic sword and dodge it. But even so, accidents still happened sometimes. Noah's arm was injured because he was a little slow to react in the gymnasium just now. As a result, he was grazed by Tony's magic sword. With that, Noah's arm was split open with a large wound. An unstoppable demonic sword was not just for show. It seems that in addition to increasing the attack range and non-stop attacks, Tony's demonic sword can also make injuries more difficult to heal and aggravate the pain. Noah nodded as he wiped the blood off his arm. There are strong and weak gods, and naturally, there are strong and weak authority. Tony's demonic sword, authority, is one of the best among all the God Slayers and the God of Disobedience. If I can adapt to that kind of slash, I'll have a better chance against the God of Disobedience. I just don't know what kind of God Tony will find. Noah shook his head helplessly. I hope it's not the kind of God of Disobedience that has troublesome authority. At this moment, a voice sounded behind Noah. Ah, isn't this Lord Noah? It was not so much a sweet voice, but rather a voice that purposely emphasized elegance and confidence. The moment he heard this voice, Noah knew who it was. He turned his head and looked behind him. What entered his sight was the person Noah had expected. She had long golden hair that reached her waist like a crown. She was a little short in height, but her figure was extremely large. Like a noble lady, she was walking out of the elevator. Her walking posture was very proper and majestic, attracting the attention of the people around her all the time. The Grand Knight of the Red Copper Black Cross Erica Brantary. Beside this girl who had always emphasized her elegance was another girl. It was a girl who reminded people of a fairy. Her appearance was delicate and proper, but her expression was extremely tense. She gave people a feeling of cuteness and majesty at the same time. The girl tied her long silver hair into a ponytail and let it hang behind her. As she walked, it swayed like a tail. Together with Erica, she gradually approached Noah. Looking at this unfamiliar girl, Noah stopped walking and allowed Erica and the silver-haired fairy girl to walk in front of him. However, as soon as she arrived in front of Noah, the silver-haired girl clearly sized up Noah with a scrutinizing gaze. After a while, she suddenly opened her mouth. After a while, she suddenly said, "Are you Lord Noah Dole?" The girl's tone was the kind that would make people feel that she was too rigid and stern. Noah often encountered such a tone from people like Alusha and Orange Bar, so he nodded with ease. "You are. Excuse me. As a knight, I should first report my name." The silver-haired girl clenched her right fist and placed it in front of her left chest. She bowed slightly to Noah and saluted. "Greetings from the Red Copper Black Cross, Liliana Kranikar." Liliana Kranikar. Noah seemed to have heard this name from somewhere. "I remember, it seems to be related to a genius child who obtained the glory of a grand knight before she reached adulthood, just like me, Erica Brantley." Without giving Noah a chance to recall, Erica laughed out loud. "In the whole of Italy, the only person of the same age who can make me, Erica Brantley, acknowledge is Liliana. Don't forget it." Hearing Erica's words, Noah remembered. In the past few days, Noah also learned a lot about the European magic world from Andre and Paul. Among them, Erica and Liliana were the focus of attention. As for why, the reason was very simple. This was because both Erica and Liliana were not yet 16 years old, but they had both obtained the rank of Grand Knight, which could only be obtained by the most outstanding elites among the knights. There were only 2 people in the whole of Italy who could achieve this at this age. Erica Brantley. Liliana Kranikar. Only these 2 girls. "I'm really surprised," Noah couldn't help but say. "You 2 are actually together." Noah heard that the 2 magic associations, Red Bronze Black Cross and Red Bronze Black Cross, seemed to be in a hostile relationship. He didn't expect that the treasures of the 2 magic associations would actually be together. "Liliana is my acknowledged competitor, how can I let her appear out of my sight?" Erica spread out her hands and revealed an inside story. "Not to mention, Liliana is my childhood sweetheart." "Don't call me that intimately, you vixen." Liliana couldn't help but burst out swearing. "I don't have such a good relationship with you, it's just an ill-fated relationship." Saying such a sentence, Liliana deliberately coughed to make herself serious and looked at Noah. "I just want to see what kind of man is rumored to be able to withstand the magic sword of Salba Lei Ching." Hearing this, Noah was speechless. He didn't know when it started, but the story of Noah withstanding Tony's magic sword completely spread in the past 3 days. This also led to the heads of various magic associations from all over Italy looking at Noah with amazement, surprise, horror, and sometimes even horror. Not many people dared to come up and greet Noah. As Andre said, Noah had completely become a celebrity. Under such circumstances, Noah could only answer, "You came to me because of this." "No, this is just by the way." Liliana's expression became more serious. "I came here to inform Your Excellency that there is news of God." Chapter 464. In a room on the top floor of the hotel, Tony sat cross-legged on the sofa, holding his sword and wiping it constantly. It was apparent that he was in a good mood. In front of Tony, Paul and Andre were also sitting on the sofa, but they seemed to be trying their best to persuade Tony. However, due to Tony's disregard, they seemed to be on the verge of tears. A hint of anger even appeared in Andre's eyes, and he was on the verge of exploding. But even so, Tony wasn't moved at all. He continued to wipe his sword and hummed a tune, completely ignoring Paul's and Andre's words. Gotcha. With the slight sound of the door opening, Noah walked into the room, instantly attracting the attention of everyone in the room. Yo, Noah, you're here. Upon sight of Noah, Tony's sloppy attitude disappeared instantly. He gazed at Noah with a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Your prey is here. Erica and Liliana followed Noah here. At this moment, Liliana took a step forward and asked Tony in a respectful and questioning manner. Pardon me for being blunt, Salvatore. Even though I've heard about this matter, do you really intend to let an ordinary person slay a deity? Lily, I think you'd better give up, Erica said with a vexed expression, which was rare of her. How much time do you think we've spent on Salvatore in the past 3 days? But Salvatore hasn't changed her mind. This can't be described as unscrupulous anymore, right? Liliana was speechless for a moment before turning to Andre. Andre, do you think this is alright too? Just like Miss Erica said, how much effort do you think I've spent on this stupid king in the past 3 days? Andre sighed tiredly. But Salvatore has no intention of compromising at all. We have no other choice. Your Excellency Noah. Even Paul turned to Noah and asked. Do you think this is alright too? Everyone's eyes were focused on Noah. In the past 3 days, Noah's deeds had already spread throughout the magic societies in Italy. Now, as long as it was a magic association that belonged to Italy, they would definitely know that a man named Noah Doria had blocked the magic sword of the leader of Italy, the King of Swords, with his human body. To put it bluntly, even if this incident wasn't enough to be recorded in the history books, it was enough to attract the attention of the entire magic world. I believe that in the current Italy, there shouldn't be anyone who would feel that Noah is inferior to those who have the highest honor of the Holy Knight rank, right? Even so, it was still too irrational to challenge a god. After all, even if it were those who could be said to be the pinnacle of humanity, if they were to challenge the gods, it would be fine to seal those weak gods, but if they wanted to kill the gods, it would only be a daydream. Unless a miracle happened. Such a miracle had only happened 6 times in the past few hundred years, resulting in the birth of 6 godslayers. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be. No one doubted Noah's strength. But killing a god wasn't something that could be done with strength. Therefore, almost no one thought that Noah could succeed. It all depended on whether Noah himself had such an understanding. Unfortunately, Noah had already made a decision. Everyone, you don't have to say any more. Just think of me as the kind of stupid person who overestimates himself and wants to challenge a god. Noah gave his answer tactfully. If I fail, you can just let your alliance leader step in. Well, before I became a god-slayer, I was much weaker than Noah. Tony waved his hand impatiently. He's an opponent that I acknowledge. How can he lose to a mere god of disobedience? Hearing this sentence, whether it was Erica, who valued beauty, Paul, who had the identity of the commander-in-chief, or even Liliana and Andre, they all cursed in their hearts. A mere god of disobedience. Not many god-slayers would dare to say that, right? However, that was what Tony said. It wasn't because Tony was so strong that he could trample on the god of disobedience like an ant. It was just that Tony was talking nonsense with his own subjective impression. Compared to the god of disobedience, Tony obviously paid more attention to the so-called opponent, Noah, which was why he said so. Perhaps, in Tony's heart, he had already determined that Noah couldn't fail, right? Should I say that he's really an idiot? Since even Sir Noah said so, it's useless for us to object. Paul shook his head and looked at Tony. We only hope that if Sir Noah fails, you can immediately rush over and deal with the god of disobedience who brought disaster to the people. Don't worry. Tony smiled confidently. There's no need for that. Looking at Tony, who had no intention of changing his mind, everyone could only smile bitterly. To be honest, Tony might really believe that Noah could successfully kill a god more than Noah himself. Noah shook his head with a smile and looked straight at Paul. So, Mr. Paul, did the god of disobedience really appear? Yes. Although the place where it appeared was far from Rome, we still received the report. Paul finally became serious when it came to business. In the past, magic societies like us that were far away from the place where the god of disobedience appeared could only passively wait for the god of disobedience to cause trouble. But this time, because of your request, we were lucky enough to collect the information in advance. Just this morning, the Bronze Cross also received the same secret report. Perhaps because the society she belonged to was hostile to Paul, Liliana was not willing to be outdone. It is said that the god that appeared this time seems to have the appearance of the god of youth, and it hasn't caused any trouble yet. It seems like it's looking for something. God of youth. Noah and Tony looked at each other. Gods were originally born in myths. Whatever form they had in myths, they would generally be in that form. And there were many gods in myths that appeared in the form of youth. The god of youth who seems to be looking for something. Noah pondered for a while before asking. Do you know what god it is? We haven't found out its real name yet. It was Erica who answered this question. Erica looked at Noah with a curious and provocative gaze and shrugged very casually. However, there is information that someone has witnessed the god of youth turning into a gust of wind and disappearing. So, the other party should be a god related to the wind, right? Wind. Noah frowned at first, but then he relaxed his brows. Is there any other information? This god that appears in the form of a youth will only appear in some ruins and seaside. Paul sighed aloud. There hasn't been any trouble yet. It should be because this god is still looking for something, and he hasn't found it yet. If he finds it, then it won't be so peaceful anymore. In other words, is this the calm before the storm? Tony couldn't help but clench his sword. His eyes gradually became bright, but his expression was very conflicted. I really want to go and meet this god, but it's Noah's prey. Ching, are you really not going to think about it? Erica seized the opportunity and said in a tempting tone. Maybe it's a very powerful god. Liliana, Paul, and Andre also looked at Tony expectantly. No one wanted to see the battle between the god slayer and the god of disobedience because every battle meant that there would be a price to pay. For example, the collapse of a building under a powerful force was a common occurrence. However, instead of letting the layman deal with the god, everyone present was obviously more willing to see Tony take action. You don't have to persuade me. Don't look at me like this. I'm very righteous. Tony curled his lips. So, where is the god of disobedience now? Sardinia. Paul said. The god that appeared is in Sardinia. As soon as this sentence came out, Noah, Tony, and Andre were all stunned. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were in Sardinia 3 days ago. Chapter 465. Sardinia. Returning to this island again after 3 days, Noah actually had a feeling that things were still the same, but the people had changed. Standing on the busy street, Noah recalled that he had met a god slayer in less than an hour after coming to this world 3 days ago. He had even fought with the god slayer. Now, 3 days later, he had even decided to kill a god. Noah sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that he would encounter so many things as soon as he came to this world? Not to mention, in such a world, there were the so-called god-slayers and disobedient gods. I've really come to an incredible world. After leaving such a murmur that only he could hear, Noah lifted his feet and walked forward. Around him, on the streets that were filled with people, regardless of whether they were men, women, old or young, all of them cast their gazes in Noah's direction the moment he passed by. Their eyes were filled with amazement. Of course, this amazement was not directed at Noah, but at the two girls beside Noah. Her long golden hair and silver hair shone brightly under the light of the setting sun, even giving off a feeling of sparkling light. Erica and Liliana walked to Noah's left and right and chatted with each other. "Lily, we are now on a holiday island. Why don't you relax a little and let yourself relax?" Erica Brantley, although I know that the more important the time, the more you like to use a relaxed attitude to show your ease, at such an important moment, I really hate your pretentiousness. Have you forgotten what we are here for? You are still the same. Once you are in a bad mood, you will speak without thinking. You are always so serious, which will scare away the gentlemen who come to chat with you. I'll say it again, we are not here for a holiday, Erica. If you like to play, then play by yourself. I hope you will not disturb me. Alas, you are so rigid that you have become a poor woman who likes to fantasize about some incredible plots. I am not that kind of person. Your attitude explains everything, Lily. Tisk. You vixen. You like to play with me since I was a child. You won't let me go until now. Because Lily's reaction is really interesting, isn't it? One day, I will definitely kill you. Erica and Liliana never stopped talking like this from leaving Rome to taking the plane, from getting off the plane to entering the street. The two young ladies, who were like the sun and the moon, had dazzling golden hair and soft silver hair respectively. They accompanied Noah as if it was only natural for them to do so. The surrounding people's gazes were all focused on the two young ladies. The golden and silver young ladies seemed to have gotten used to it. They didn't mind it at all and continued to bicker while following Noah closely. Noah couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Why did you two come with me? Noah was just talking to himself. Noah had already guessed the reason. As expected, Liliana gave a serious answer. Since you don't intend to take action, it is our responsibility to stop the disaster brought by the God of Disobedience. As a knight, be it me or the Bronze Cross, we have the obligation to face it. Compared to Liliana's serious reason, Electra's explanation was a little strange. Even you, who came out of nowhere, can replace Salbalay to face the god. If I, Erica Brantley, can't show my bravery, that will be the most humiliating thing. Although Noah said that, he knew that there was another reason for these two girls to come with him. And that was to supervise Noah. To be more precise, they were here to witness the entire process of Noah challenging the god. If Noah failed, Erica and Liliana would immediately report this matter to the Bronze Cross so that Tony, who was on standby in Rome, could rush over to clean up the mess and avoid causing more trouble. And if Noah was lucky enough to succeed, then the birth of the world's seventh king who killed a god would be a big deal, more important than the appearance of the God of Disobedience. Naturally, they would need to bring back the information in this regard truthfully. After all, as the demon king that humans could not challenge, the birth of every God Slayer meant that the world had one more atomic bomb that could explode at any time. Therefore, the birth of a God Slayer had always been the most concerned issue in the world. In this regard, even the God of Disobedience was not as important as the God Slayer. That was why Erica and Liliana came with Noah, right? Of course, Erica and Liliana's reason was also one of the reasons. There was no doubt about it. Forget it. It's up to you, as long as you think it's okay, Noah paused and said as if nothing had happened. However, since you followed me here, should I treat you as my competitors? Or should I treat you as my companions? We don't mean to disagree with you, Liliana said without hesitation. Since we're here to solve the problem of the God of Disobedience, helping the people here to solve their problems is our consensus, so I'll help you. Or rather, whether we're competitors or companions, don't you think it's a good thing to let these two relationships coexist? Erica suddenly smiled in a noble manner. Just as Lily said, we're all here to solve the problem of the God of Disobedience, so we should be companions. But in the process, we can show each other our talents and see who's better. Isn't that a wonderful thing? In other words, Noah glanced at Erica and Liliana. It doesn't matter if we're companions or not. You're not the kind of people who would stab me in the back at a critical moment, right? Of course. Liliana frowned. Noah Dole, do you think a knight like me would do such a despicable thing? You can't pretend that you didn't hear that. The smile on Erica's face gradually changed. If it's a duel, it should be fair and square. If you force that kind of undignified method on me, I'll take it as an insult to me. Don't be nervous. I'm just making sure. Noah spread his hands and patted his cheeks. So, where should we go next? Seeing that Noah changed the topic, Erica and Liliana didn't want to continue the conversation. They looked at each other and turned their gazes to Noah, who was walking in the middle. The god that appeared on this island appeared in the form of a young man named Wind Follower. He has also been to some ruins on this island, Erica replied. We don't know where that young god is now. Because he could transform into Wind Follower, our helpers on this island have long lost track of him. That's why we have to find God first, Liliana said in a serious tone. That god seems to have been to some ruins. Our destination is there. If I'm lucky, I might be able to find out where that god went through spirit vision. Hearing this, Noah felt relieved. Noah had more or less heard about spirit vision. It was said that it was a special ability that could decipher the mysteries of the world. Sometimes, it could even more or less see the future. There was no doubt that this ability had a lot of limitations. First of all, it had to be possessed by someone with a special constitution. Secondly, spirit vision wasn't something that could be activated at will. There was a certain probability of it happening. Therefore, if someone with the ability of spirit vision wanted to decipher any mystery, they would generally try their best to come into contact with this mystery. This could increase the probability of triggering spirit vision. Of course, there was another point. The number of things that could be seen by spirit vision depended on the aptitude of the person with the ability of spirit vision. In addition, it also needed to be random. Liliana had this ability. If Liliana went to the place where the god had been before, it was still possible for her to see the god's whereabouts. Thinking of this, Noah made a decision. Then, let's go. Chapter 466. Not long after, night came to Sardinia. For the resort island, night was also a lively time. Therefore, the streets were still crowded. Not only did the number of people not decrease, but it also gradually increased. However, this was no big deal to Noah, Erica, and Liliana, who had walked out of the streets. Perhaps it was because they had been to Sardinia before, or because they had made all the necessary preparations before departure. Erica and Liliana took Noah in a straightforward manner. They took a car and walked. Finally, when it was dark, they arrived in front of a ruin. This was a very dilapidated ruin. Whether it was the walls, stone pillars, or the ground, they all had an ancient aura and a dilapidated appearance. For example, although some walls were carved with many strange patterns, only half of them were left. For example, the stone pillar was directly broken at the waist, and the other half was horizontal between the ground and the stone pillar. Another example was that the ground was also cracked, as if something had broken out of the ground. There was no value in keeping such a ruin. However, the residents of Sardinia seemed to think that it would be bad to tear it down, so they left it here, unused. The god that appeared on this island seems to be looking for something. Erica repeated this sentence that she had heard countless times as she looked around. But, would the thing that the god is looking for be in a place like this? The older a place is, the more secrets it must hide. The cleansing of history is not just a saying. Noah came to a broken stone pillar, reached out his hand, and gently stroked the rough surface of the pillar. However, that god obviously didn't find what he was looking for, which is why he's still wandering. He hasn't caused any trouble, right? To humans, the god of disobedience was like a ferocious beast running into the streets. There was no need to mention the danger. After all, the god of disobedience was a god of the opposite path. This kind of god generally had two characteristics. 1. Paranoia. Because they did not have desires like humans, the god of disobedience would carry out their instincts and duties in an extremely paranoid and crazy way. For example, if a god of war became the god of disobedience, then in order to be able to fight, he would do anything at all costs, including destroying all of humanity. And if the god of disobedience that appeared was the kind of divinity that spread death and plague, then the other party would take this responsibility as the meaning of life and would not hesitate to turn all the places he passed into hell and death. 2. Unscrupulous. To gods, human lives were like beasts. Even if they killed them, they would not feel any guilt. Just like how humans killed birds, if necessary, the god of disobedience would not hesitate because of human lives. If a hornet's nest in a person's home, he would do his best to get rid of it. Gods were the same. Once God thought that humans were in his way, he would not hesitate to eradicate all humans in his sight. Even if they looked similar, gods and humans, they were. Therefore, just as humans could slaughter chickens, ducks, and geese without any guilt, human lives were no different from chickens, ducks, and geese to God. Therefore, once the god of disobedience with such values appeared, it would definitely cause trouble. For this reason, the magic societies in all corners of the world had the obligation to treat the god of disobedience as an enemy in order to protect themselves and others. Not to mention, the existence of gods would also cause all kinds of trouble, which would indirectly affect the world. Now, the god who could turn into a youth and wind had not caused any trouble for the time being because he was looking for something. However, once he found what he wanted, he would not be able to remain calm. Like Noah and Erica, Liliana was also in the ruins. The girl swayed her silver ponytail, constantly wandering around the ruins and doing all kinds of things. Sometimes she touched the stone wall. Sometimes she put her face on the stone pillar. Sometimes she just lay on the ground and closed her eyes. Sometimes she seemed to be absent-minded, as if she was being pulled by invisible strings, walking back and forth. Seeing Liliana like this, Noah and Erica both kept their mouths shut and did not disturb her. Under such circumstances, Liliana arrived in front of a stone wall at an unknown time. Her pupils suddenly lost focus, but her eyes lit up with a dim light. Youth. Wind. Guardian of the crown. Sun. At the sight of this, Noah and Erica's spirits were lifted at the same time. They quietly came to Liliana's back and watched her silently. Walk, to seek victory, and also to seek defeat, Liliana kept murmuring as if in a dream. After a while, the light in her eyes began to dissipate. Her slackened pupils gradually condensed, and her expression became relatively bright. Oh. Erica smiled elegantly. It seems that Lily has discovered something. How is it? Noah asked directly. Did you see anything? Liliana nodded heavily, but her expression became a little distressed. But that's not good news. Hearing this, Noah and Erica looked at each other and nodded. Let's find a hotel first. Noah made a decision decisively. Anyway, it's impossible to find that god today. Let's rest while sorting out the information we got. Liliana hesitated for a moment but did not object. She nodded in agreement. Just like that, a man and two women walked out of the ruins. On a holiday island like Sardinia, not only were there small stalls and canteens, but there were also high-end restaurants. Noah had only been in this world for less than 4 to 5 days. During these 4 to 5 days, he had been dragged around by Donnie. Naturally, he did not have the money of this world. However, as prodigies of the Copper Black Cross and the Bronze Black Cross, one of the most famous magic societies in Italy, Erica and Liliana were not short of money. Therefore, under Erica's suggestion, the three chose a hotel with a high-end restaurant. They first ordered food, then listened to Liliana's explanation while filling their stomachs. My spirit vision did see that great existence. Liliana began to explain with a serious expression. That's a god of war for victory. No, it should be said that he himself represents victory and the guardian of the king and the people, the trusted aid of the sun, the undefeated ancient Persian god of war. The god of victory. Or the guardian of the king and the people? The trusted aid of the sun and the ancient Persian god of war. Erica was stunned when she heard Liliana say such words. Hey, Lily, could that god be? It should be what you think. Liliana sighed. I only saw some fragments, but it's not difficult to guess that person's identity. That's true. Erica frowned and became distressed. After all, that god is very famous. What are you talking about? Noah said unhappily. Unlike you magicians who have learned about gods since young in order to deal with gods, I don't know much about gods. Who are you talking about? We're talking about the ancient Persian god of war, the guardian of the god of light, Mitra. Since Mitra is the incarnation of the sun, this god also has a deep relationship with the sun, Liliana explained. He's the invincible god of war with 10 incarnations. In West Asia, he's known as the guardian of light. He has the same origin as India's Thunder Emperor Indra. Not only is he a god of victory, but he's also the guardian of the king and the people. Velaslana. Erica finally said the name of that god. Because he's the Persian god of war, you might not know much about him, but this god of victory is no ordinary god. In the myths, he's an undefeated god. Hearing this, Noah frowned. A god of victory. Didn't that mean that if Noah wanted to slay a god, it was equivalent to doing something that no man or god in the myths could do? Was it that difficult? That might be the worst god for you. Liliana seemed to understand Noah's thoughts, but she revealed another piece of news. The most troublesome thing is that now, this god is preparing to summon another god. Chapter 467. Summoning Another God. Noah and Erica were both stunned and surprised. My spirit vision did capture it. The ancient Persian god of war is looking for the god sleeping on this island. Liliana's tone was a little heavy. It is precisely because he wants to wake up the god sleeping on this island that the god of war has been wandering around the various ruins of Sardinia. Because he wants to wake up the god, he also left his own cursed power in those ruins. That's why I was able to successfully trigger spirit vision. In other words, the reason why the god hasn't made a fuss until now is not because he doesn't want to, but because he wants to make a fuss. Noah said in surprise. Is there no way for humans to satisfy him at this level? If you think about it carefully, it might be possible. Erica frowned deeply. The ancient Persian god of war is known to be invincible. Now that he has become a rebellious god of disobedience, it's not strange that he wants to find an opponent who can fight with him. Fortunately, Sarbatrem, who stayed on this island not long ago, has already left. Otherwise, Velaslana's target wouldn't be the god sleeping on this island, but the deicide, Liliana said with a troubled expression on her face. One god is troublesome enough. If Velaslana wakes up another god, it will be really bad. Hey, Lily. Erica seemed to have thought of something and suddenly changed the topic. You said that Velaslana is trying to awaken the god sleeping on this island, but in the myths, there is only one god who can rival the god of victory and has a deep relationship with this island. Isn't there only one god? Although I don't want to admit it, my thoughts are the same as yours. Liliana sighed. To be able to catch the eye of the god of war and have a deep relationship with this island, if I'm not wrong, it should be Mekhl. As soon as this was said, the man and two women, including Noah, fell silent. Noah was not very familiar with LoveLore, the god of war from ancient Persia. However, Noah had heard of Mechel's words before. Or rather, he had read about it in a book. He was the hero god in Canaan mythology. He was the god of the city in the Phoenician port city of Tyre. He was equivalent to Hercules and the patron god of the voyagers, Mariquarts. Tyre was a city built by the Phoenicians. It was also the home port of the Phoenicians, the tyrants of the ancient Mediterranean. However, the Phoenicians were once the rulers of Sardinia. Therefore, the god that the Phoenicians believed in, Mechel, became the god that had a deep affinity with Sardinia. Mechel was a god-king who possessed the attributes of wind, lightning, sky, and so on. There were also gods like Zeus and Odin, who were well known as the highest gods. There was no doubt that they were the highest gods. Now, the invincible war god of ancient Persia was planning to awaken the divine king who could rival him in battle. That would be a disaster for humans. Noah, Erica, and Liliana did not doubt that if the two famous gods were to fight, it was absolutely possible that the entire Sardinia would be affected and sunk. The invincible war god and the highest divine king. Noah felt his head start to hurt. Do we have to make it so difficult? No, it's too early to make a conclusion. Erica shook her head. LoveLore hasn't awakened Mechel yet. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We still have a way to stop it. The problem is that if we want to stop the war god, there is no doubt that we will have to clash head-on with him. Liliana confirmed with Noah worriedly. Are you sure you can do it? Without Tony's help, Erica and Liliana could only rely on Noah. After all, Noah was the one who really had to deal with the god of disobedience. However, the gods that appeared this time were not ordinary. One of them was the undefeated war god, and the other one had yet to appear, but once he did, he would be at the highest level. He was definitely not below LoveLore, the god king. Dealing with these two gods, even if Tony, the god slayer, came, there was a high chance that he would be defeated. And Noah was just an ordinary person. No, it was a bit too much to say that he was an ordinary person. Noah could withstand Tony's magical sword unscathed, and he was stronger than many of the so-called paladins who stood at the peak of humans in this world. But he was still human after all. Want to fight with the gods? It was not impossible, but it was a matter of whether he could do it in the end. Under Erica and Liliana's gazes, Noah curled his lips into a smile. You know what? A man can't say no. Without giving Erica and Liliana a chance to react, Noah turned his head and asked Liliana. Do you know where LoveLore is now? As for the specific location, I don't know now. Liliana was startled at first, but then she answered reflexively. However, the war god's purpose is to awaken the divine king, Mechel. As long as he moves, he will definitely emit fluctuations of spell power. I have already used spirit vision to capture LoveLore once in that ruin, so as long as he gathers his spell power again, I will sense it. Then there's no problem. Noah's expression relaxed. Let's find LoveLore first, and then we'll act according to the situation. With that, Noah stood up and said to Erica and Liliana, who were still in a daze, don't worry. It's getting late, and it's time to rest. Tomorrow will be very busy. After saying this, Noah went straight to the counter. Wait. Wait. Erica and Liliana woke up and quickly stood up and chased after him. The next day, early morning, today, Noah woke up early in the morning. He got up when the sun had just risen. After washing up, Noah walked out of the hotel and looked at the deserted street. After a while, his eyes fixed on a vast square next to the hotel. Yesterday, when Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to this hotel, this vast square was already filled with all kinds of stalls. But now, the sun had just risen, and there were not many people on the street. Naturally, there would not be any stalls in this square. And this square just happened to be Noah's target. Coming to this square, Noah closed his eyes and took a deep breath of fresh air. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. Boom! Surging blue flames centered on the star pattern that suddenly appeared on Noah's chest. It suddenly burned and turned into a pitch-black knight's sword, falling into Noah's hand. Holding the knight's sword tightly, Noah raised it in front of him and pointed the tip of the sword forward, as if aiming at an invisible enemy. He began to concentrate. In the battle against the gods, Noah could only rely on the two weapons in his soul. Because, whether it was the God Slayer or the God of Disobedience, they both had an extremely foul physique. The nullification of magic. No. Not just magic. Spells, yin-yang spells, and so on, as long as they were used against the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience, they would all be nullified, even if they were beneficial spells such as healing and support. In other words, the magic and spells that Noah mastered could not be used against the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience, unless it was a magic that worked on himself like the enhancement magic. Otherwise, as long as it was used against the gods, it would be nullified. In this way, Noah's strength was equivalent to wasting more than half, and he could only rely on the two weapons in his soul and his own skills. This was quite a disadvantageous situation, and it also made Noah realize how foul the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience were. However, there was no turning back. Since he had decided, Noah would not go back on his words. If he wanted to obtain authority and become a God Slayer, he would not have the consciousness to risk his life. It was better to go home early, wash up, and sleep. What Noah could do was to race against time to strengthen the cards that he could use. At this time, a voice sounded from behind Noah. "Is that your sword?" Hearing this, Noah's hand movement stopped and looked behind him. He saw that Liliana, who was dressed in a blue and black formal dress, walked towards Noah with a proper posture, and a trace of curiosity appeared on her usually serious face. "Do you want to compete with me?" Chapter 468. Would you like to have a duel with me? While saying that, Liliana's eyes began to burn with passion. "I, Liliana Kranikar, request an audience with your sword, the Grand Knight of the Bronze Black Cross, whom even Minister Sarbatrie praised." At this moment, Liliana's voice was full of provocation, just like Erica's. From this provocation, Noah didn't sense any hostility, but her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. Noah had heard this tone from Erica more than once in the past few days. And the reason why Erica used this tone was obvious to Noah even if he used his knees to guess. It was because only 2 people in the entire Italy had achieved the rank of a Grand Knight when they were still underage. Erica and Liliana were known as prodigies by the relevant people in the magic world. It wasn't difficult to understand why Erica would be so confident after achieving such an achievement when she was still underage. For such a talented prodigy, how could she easily admit that others were better than her? However, Noah's excellence was beyond doubt. Because he, as an ordinary human, blocked the power of a God Slayer. If Noah were an old man in his 70s or 80s, Erica and Liliana would definitely not mind Noah who had achieved such an achievement. Unfortunately, Noah was only a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. In terms of age, Noah was only 3 to 4 years older than Erica and Liliana. However, a person who was only 3 to 4 years older than them had achieved something that even the Holy Knights, who had the highest honor and rank, couldn't do, which stimulated Erica's and Liliana's self-confidence. Under such circumstances, it was only natural that Erica would constantly use a provocative tone to talk to Noah in an attempt to prove herself. At first, Noah thought that Liliana didn't care about this, but now it seemed that Liliana was just not as unscrupulous as Erica. She also had the intention to challenge Noah. In this regard, Noah just stared at Liliana's eyes that were full of fighting spirit. After a while, the corners of his mouth curled up. Well, it's not a bad idea to treat it as a morning exercise. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Liliana's eyes flashed and she stretched out her hand in the direction of Noah. My wings, the steel that forms the phantom blades. Silver Master Alchemist, bestow me strength. When such an incantation sounded, a glimmer of light emerged on Liliana's slender body and turned into a weapon that fell into her hand. It was a silver-white saber. Whoosh! With a sudden swing of the saber in her hand, Liliana assumed an attacking posture while her eyes were fixed on Noah. Nice to meet you. Likewise. Compared to Liliana's extremely ornamental posture, Noah just lightly raised the knight's sword in his hand and pointed it at Liliana. Come on. You can attack at will. This sentence sounded like he was looking down on his opponent, but Liliana did not feel angry at all. Instead, her expression was solemn. It was not the first time that Liliana saw such a casual posture without tensing up his body. Italy's King of Swords was almost the same after drawing his sword. He did not assume any stance, just relaxed his body, and the right hand holding the sword drooped down casually. Anyone who had seen Salbar Doni's swordsmanship would know how frightening that seemingly unprofessional and belittling stance was. Because if there was no stance, it meant that any move could be derived. Doni did not need any offensive or defensive stance. His swordsmanship had already been completely integrated with his body. Even if he had lost all his memories, once he fought, that amazing swordsmanship could still be performed by relying on his body's memory. Therefore, Doni's stance was useful even when fighting against an extraordinary enemy like God. It was truly a realm where he did not need any moves to adapt to the situation. The East called this realm, having no moves is better than having moves. Liliana, who had seen this realm, saw that although Noah was not sloppy, he was more casual and relaxed than Doni. Naturally, all the vigilance in her heart exploded. Sure enough, in terms of swordsmanship, he's already comparable to Salbar Lay. Liliana's expression became more and more solemn, but the scorching heat in her eyes became more and more intense. However, this is what makes the challenge meaningful. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Noah who was casually standing in front of her. She slowly clenched the Silver Grandmaster Craftsman sword in her hand, and a faint spell power quickly flowed on the surface of her body, giving Liliana a sense of tyrannical power. Hey dash! With a clear shout, Liliana tapped the ground with the tip of her toes and charged straight at Noah who was close at hand. She slightly bent her wrist, and the blade of the military knife in her hand glowed with a cold light. When she was only half a meter away from Noah, she suddenly stopped and drew a tricky arc in front of Noah. She! Like a flash of silver light, Liliana's military knife turned into lightning and shot straight at Noah's direction. Looking at the incoming military knife, Noah just raised his hand unhurriedly and pointed the knight's sword in his hand. Ding! In the next moment, the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword accurately hit the tip of Liliana's military saber. With a crisp sound, the military saber was pushed back. Clang! The sudden force acting on the military knife made Liliana's body feel as if she was hit by something. She instantly retreated more than 10 steps, and after a while, she stopped her body awkwardly. Liliana's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and mixed some curse power with the military knife in her hand. Her body rushed toward Noah again. The military knife turned into a flash of silver light and suddenly stabbed out. Ding! Another crisp sound rang out. But this time, the tip of Liliana's military knife accurately pointed at the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword that Noah had not yet retracted. Perhaps Liliana wanted to return an eye for an eye. However, Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. His hand that was holding the sword suddenly turned and retracted, pulling the knight's sword back. Then, something strange happened. Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman seemed to be directly attracted by Noah's knight's sword. As Noah retracted the knight's sword, Liliana and her sword were pulled over. What dash! Liliana's heart skipped a beat. Her feet subconsciously gripped the ground, but her body still drew an arc in the air and crashed straight into Noah. Then, looking at Noah who was getting closer and closer to her, Liliana's gaze turned cold. She simply gave up resisting and let her body crash into Noah's direction. The cursed power in her body quickly condensed on her palm and quickly gathered on the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. If you can't resist, then attack. With a cold shout, Liliana's body turned and she fiercely tightened the military knife in her hand. Accompanied by a sharp wind-breaking sound, she fiercely slashed toward Noah's shoulder. Feeling the sharp wind coming toward him, Noah's hand tightened. The knight's sword suddenly slashed out like a meteor and once again accurately pointed at Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Ding! This time, it was on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. A violent force gushed out along with Noah's stab, causing the tip of the knight's sword to ignite a spark on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. An invisible repulsive force fiercely hit Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. After a moment of stalemate, it rushed toward Liliana's direction like a shock wave. Bang! Liliana only felt a huge force coming from the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Her body was shocked by the repulsive force and she slid more than 10 meters on the ground, leaving a long shoe print on the ground. Ha! Ha! Liliana could not help but gasp. First, she glanced at Noah who did not even move from his position, then she looked at her trembling hand that was holding the knife. Her eyes fluctuated. So strong. This person is so strong. Maybe, he can really, how is it? Noah raised his eyebrows. Still want to go. Hearing this, Liliana's expression became uncertain. In the end, she sighed and shook her head. I lost. Noah smiled. Chapter 469. Here. After buying the cold drinks from the small stall that had just been set up, Noah walked towards Liliana who was sitting on the bench in the square and passed one of the bottles to her. Although it's not a strenuous exercise, it's better to drink it. Hearing this, Liliana looked at the cold drink in front of her. After hesitating for a while, she nodded her head. Accepting gifts from others without any reason is not something that a knight should do. However, since it's done out of goodwill, it's a different story. I'll accept it with gratitude. After speaking like an honest and upright official in the face of a bribe, Liliana politely reached out her hand and took the cold drink in Noah's hand while Noah was at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps because she was too concerned about whether she should accept it or not, Liliana's hand accidentally touched Noah's hand. Ah! Suddenly, Liliana opened her eyes wide and blushed. She quickly retracted her hand. Seeing this, Noah tilted his head and asked curiously. What are you doing? No, nothing. Liliana replied loudly, giving Noah a shock. What's wrong with this girl all of a sudden? Little did he know that Liliana seemed to have thought of something and looked at Noah shyly. You. Could it be that you deliberately did this to me for this purpose? Ha! Noah was at a loss. What purpose? What do you mean? Just. Liliana seemed to be very nervous as she twisted her hand. She lowered her head and said shyly. To touch my hand, give me water, what? Liliana's voice was too soft. Noah frowned and subconsciously moved his head closer to her. Say that again. Ah! Looking at Noah's head that suddenly moved closer, Liliana shouted and jumped up. She pulled a distance away from Noah and pointed at Noah with a flushed face and shouted. "What are you trying to do?" The corner of Noah's mouth twitched as he looked at Liliana, whose beautiful face was flushed and her eyes were moist. However, she was looking at him warily. It was said that geniuses were generally weird. Could it be that Liliana was a typical example? If Noah knew that Liliana had such a series of reactions because she touched Noah's hand, he would be even more speechless. Was there a need to have such a strong reaction? Was it better to be pure? Or was it better to be too sensitive? Of course, Noah would never have imagined that Liliana would have such a reaction. It was all because she was too delusional. Although I don't know what's wrong with you, Noah rolled his eyes speechlessly. But, if you don't want to interact with me, then I'll go back. No, it's not like that. Liliana finally calmed down. While feeling ashamed of her excessive behavior just now, she pretended to be calm. I'm sorry, there was an accident just now. Please don't mind. After saying that, Liliana returned to her seat on the bench and sat down. She stared at the cold drink in Noah's hand and immediately reached out her hand to snatch the cold drink from him at lightning speed. "I will accept your kindness." That's good. Noah really didn't know what to say. What was certain was that Liliana didn't seem to be as rigid as she looked on the surface. Instead, there was a very strange part of her. With a new understanding of Liliana, Noah sat down next to Liliana. Looking at the bustling street ahead, he asked very casually. "You're up so early. Where's Miss Erica?" "Don't compare me with her." Liliana, who was still in the state of a young girl a second ago, was suddenly stimulated. She regained her usual solemn and awe-inspiring manner and even declared. "Unlike those who lays in bed every day, as a knight, I have strict requirements for my work and rest schedule. Under normal circumstances, I won't change my work and rest schedule at will." "I didn't know that Miss Erica would lays in bed." Noah curled his lips. "Sometimes, I really feel that you two are indeed childhood sweethearts." His words made Liliana frown very obviously. She said in a very resistant manner. "That's right. I don't understand why you think so. Isn't it?" Noah replied. "Both of you are known as prodigies in the magic world. But as knights, one is obviously willful and casual while the other is obviously strict and inflexible. From an extreme perspective, don't you feel that you two are compatible?" Liliana's face instantly turned gloomy. "If your childhood sweetheart invites you to watch a horror movie when you want to watch a movie, or happily eats desserts in front of you when you want to lose weight, you won't think so." He felt that the topic had become heavy all of a sudden. To what extent was this seductive female knight persecuted by that willful Miss Erica? At the thought of this, Noah could not help but feel pity for Liliana. He quickly laughed and drank his cold drink. "Oh yeah, what was that sword move just now?" Liliana seemed to have the intention to change the topic. Her expression became serious. "That sword move that attracted my Grandmaster Silver Craftsman and pulled me over, was it some kind of magic?" "That's not magic. It's just a simple technique." Noah shrugged. "The trick is in the control of strength. This is the application of using softness to overcome hardness and leveraging strength to counter strength. You should be able to understand. That sword move contains such a great mystery." Liliana looked at Noah blankly. After a while, she sighed. "It seems that I still underestimated your ability. I've seen a sword skill that even Ching is inferior to." "Noah Doria, you are indeed a person who is more talented than Ching in swordsmanship." Italy's King of Swords was a rare genius who did not know anything other than swordsmanship. This was something that everyone knew. This king didn't know anything about magic, spells, or anything like that, but he had an extraordinary obsession with swords. If it was just a competition of swords, even if one didn't take into account power, it was impossible to find a match for him in the whole of Italy. In this aspect, being able to be comparable to the King of Swords meant that Noah's swordsmanship was unparalleled in the entire Italy and even the entire world. But if you want to kill a god, you can't do it with just strength. Liliana changed the topic. She looked straight at the gradually bustling street in front of her and said solemnly without looking back. Even if you can surpass Qing in swordsmanship, the second King of Swords is not so easy to be born. What's more, the god that appeared this time is the god of war who represents victory. It is also very likely that the king of gods of the Mediterranean Sea will be involved. Liliana turned her head and looked straight at Noah. Even so, you still think that you can succeed? Noah drank the cold drink silently. After drinking all the drink in the bottle, he threw it away casually. The empty bottle drew a perfect parabola in the air and fell accurately into a trash can. Perhaps, in your eyes, a guy like me who takes the initiative to challenge a god and even wants to kill a god is like an idiot who overestimates himself, right? Noah smiled indifferently. But, such an idiot, didn't the 6 god-slayers whom you respect as kings used to be like that in the past? Liliana was speechless. Since it's not something that's absolutely impossible, it's still too early to make such a judgment. Noah turned his head and met Liliana's gaze. His dark and deep eyes were shining brightly. It's just like how you know that I'm stronger than you, but you still challenge me. I'm just exaggerating the same thing by a few levels. Regardless of whether I succeed or fail in the end, at least I have the confidence to keep my life. Since that's the case, why don't I challenge you once? Noah's dark and deep eyes stared at Noah closely. Looking at his face that was close at hand and listening to his somewhat handsome speech, Liliana felt her heart beating a little faster. Her pretty face blushed again. Rumble. At this moment, a shocking thunder suddenly sounded in the sky, startling Noah, Liliana, and everyone on the street. The originally clear sky was suddenly covered by a thick layer of clouds, becoming incomparably dark. Dazzling flashes of lightning flashed within, and the sound of thunder constantly rang out. Chapter 470. Rumble. The shocking sound of thunder continued to reverberate in the thick clouds. Thick bolts of lightning were like meteors colliding with each other. They flashed in the thick dark clouds and rolled back and forth, causing the sky to become extremely oppressive. The residents and tourists on the streets who thought that it was going to rain began to rush in the direction of their homes or hotels. Those who were setting up their stalls and preparing to make a fortune today were grumbling as they quickly packed up their stalls and walked away. Not long after, there were only a few passers-by and Noah and Liliana who didn't move at all in the square and the entire street. A man and a woman stood under the gloomy and cold sky, looking up at the scene where the sky that was clear not long ago suddenly became like the end of the world. Their expressions turned solemn. Noah Dole. Liliana's palms began to sweat unknowingly, but her voice was still as stern as ever. Do you feel it? At this level, if you still can't feel it, you can really go home, wash up, and sleep. Noah stared at the dark sky and narrowed his eyes. This is not a simple storm. There is an extremely large amount of curse power gathering in the clouds. In other words, it was not a natural phenomenon, but a man-made phenomenon. No. It was impossible for an ordinary person to cause such a phenomenon that was thicker than a normal storm. Affecting the weather was not something that could be done by ordinary power. Therefore, whether it was Noah or Liliana, they could only think of one possibility. God. Liliana's eyes glowed with a faint light. I see it. It's God's power that is affecting the weather. Is it Welslana? Noah immediately asked. Does the ever-victorious god of war also have the power to cause such a phenomenon? The ancient Persian god of war, the god of victory, often incarnated into 10 forms in myths and traveled between heaven and the human world. Perhaps because the wind was getting stronger, Liliana began to raise her voice. Strong wind, bull, white horse, camel, mountain boar, young man, phoenix, shepherd, goat, and human warrior with a golden sword. There are a total of 10 incarnations, and each incarnation has a different power. Among these 10 incarnations, the goat incarnation can summon lightning and thunder. If this phenomenon was caused by Lana, then now, the god of war should be using the goat incarnation. Liliana's face showed a hint of uneasiness as she said this. However, to be able to affect the weather to such an extent, without a certain degree of control over the sky, and there's the storm, this was beyond the reach of the power of Lana's goat incarnation. Liliana didn't say it out loud, but Noah could understand it. Storm. Sky. Lightning. Noah said in a monotonous voice. It seems that we have to prepare for the appearance of another god. The moment he finished speaking, a surge of power that was more powerful than the power gathered in the sky rose from the direction of the seaside. Over there. Liliana pointed in the direction of the huge surge of cursed power and shouted. God is there. Even without Liliana's reminder, Noah could guess it. Noah had only seen such a large amount of power from himself and Tony. He had never seen a third person who could gather such a large amount of power. This level of cursed power could only be possessed by the god that appeared on this island. There was no other possibility for this level of cursed power. Lily. At this moment, a voice came from the direction of the hotel. Electra, who was dressed in a red and black outfit that was not far off from Liliana's, walked toward Noah and Liliana with a smile as fierce as a lion's on her face. It's time for the duel. Against the storm, Noah and Liliana were flying in the sky. They turned into 2 streams of light and flew toward the seaside. Noah used the death feather form of the magician. What Liliana used was a witch spell called flight. Erica, who could not use the witch spell, was in Liliana's arms. Unlike magic, witches were magic that could only be used by pure witches. While Liliana Kranikar was a knight, she was also a witch. In the world of magic, the title of witch had great significance. Erica was also a witch in a broad sense. To be more precise, she was a female magician who used magic. There was a difference between a pure magician and a witch. Erica was only a magician who could use magic, while Liliana was the last descendant of those witches and priestesses who became saintesses in the beginning of the era. Just like Aoizi and Yuju, one could only use magic, while the other had the bloodline of a witch. The difference naturally arose. The witch spell referred to the magic that only pure-blooded witches could use. The knowledge and magic that belonged to witches were passed down orally by Liliana from the previous generation of witches. Only Liliana, the last descendant of a witch, could use the spells. Under such circumstances, the 3 of them flew in the direction of the sea, braving the strong winds. In the next second, Noah, Erica, and Liliana saw it. They saw a giant. It was a giant with messy, fluffy hair and a beard that covered the lower half of his face. He looked rather wild and unruly, and was more than 20 meters tall. On the giant's body, muscles bulged constantly. Just by looking at him, one would feel that he was very bold. He wore rough clothes. His clothes were made of dirty rags and leather. However, not only did this appearance not give people a disheveled and dirty feeling, on the contrary, it could make people involuntarily feel a sense of majesty. Just looking at it would make people want to lower their heads and retreat in an extremely oppressive manner. On the other side of the giant, a 14 or 15-year-old boy, who was even smaller than an average adult, hovered in midair and confronted the giant fearlessly. The young man's clothes were not so much the clothes of this harbor street, but more like the clothes he wore in the oasis in the desert. He was dressed in ancient Roman attire. His jet black hair reached his shoulders, and his skin was ivory. The young man was very good-looking, and his facial features were very regular. There was even a bit of a neutral feeling. He was a beautiful young man who couldn't be picked out at all. However, not only did this beautiful young man violate Newton's law and hover in midair, but his cloak also fluttered in the strong wind. His body also surged with an aura that wasn't any weaker than that of the giant. This told others that he wasn't an ordinary person who couldn't even truss up a chicken. The two figures, one big and one small, confronted each other in the ocean. The aura that gushed out of their bodies like a storm not only covered the entire ocean and sky, but also swept in all directions, shrouding Noah, Erica, and Liliana who were flying over. Almost at the same time, Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to a sudden halt and froze in midair. Under the shroud of the terrifying aura, Erica and Liliana were completely immobilized. Not only were their eyes and faces full of horror, but even their foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. These two prodigies didn't seem to have any experience facing the gods. Now that they had encountered the two gods of the highest level, the aura that leaked out was enough to awe the two genius girls on the spot. Noah was the only one who maintained his composure, but his expression was still solemn. He glanced at Erica and Liliana, took a deep breath, and suddenly spoke. "If you want to retreat, this is your last chance." Upon hearing that, Erica's and Liliana's pretty faces changed drastically. Humiliation, powerlessness, and anger at themselves. All kinds of emotions made these two talented girls bite their teeth and lips hard. Immediately, Erica said loudly, "I'm Erica Brantery." Liliana also spoke with a determined expression. "As a knight, I'm absolutely not allowed to abandon my companions and retreat." "Is that so?" Noah closed his eyes and suddenly opened them after a while. "Then, let's begin. To slay the gods." Chapter 471. Crackle, crackle. In the dark clouds, the sound of lightning and thunder continued to reverberate. Wolala. No one knew when it started, but the violent winds and torrential rain had also affected Sardinia, bringing about a weather phenomenon no less than a level 10 typhoon. Under such a vile environment, the tall giant and the young man floating in the air continued to face each other with calm expressions. They did not care about the vile weather and torrential rain at all. They were as unmoving as a mountain, and the aura emitted from their bodies was even more frightening than the torrential rain. Mekr, one of the strongest gods in the Mediterranean Sea, the king of the gods, the great warrior, the strongest dragon slayer, we finally meet. In the violent winds, the young man faced the giant that covered the sky. Not only did he not show the slightest trace of fear, but he also showed an extremely joyful and unruly look. "I am Welslana, I am the victor. Victory is always in my hands. This is my essence. No matter what battle I encounter, no matter what enemy I face, my victory will not change and cannot be shaken. That is why I have not experienced the taste of defeat until now, because no one can defeat me." With such an arrogant declaration that seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth, the god of victory named Welslana laughed, his face full of arrogance. "God King Mekr, can you grant me a defeat?" As soon as the words came out, the tall giant immediately lowered his head and looked at Welslana who was floating in the air not far from him. He let out a cold snort that could cause the sea to churn. "Welslana, the guardian of Mitra, as the god of light who used to protect the royal power, you actually dared to challenge me, the king. You deserve to die 10,000 times. Indeed, I used to be the guardian of the people and the royal power, but now I am only the god of disobedience. What remains in this body is only the will to fight and win." Welslana smiled calmly, but his expression was still full of arrogance. "Mekr, satisfy me. Give me a fight that can calm the will to fight in my body." "Ha ha ha ha." Mekr couldn't help but laugh out loud. His laughter was deafening, and the sound waves even blew away the surrounding storm. Speaking of which, this old man is now Bodeo's god of disobedience. Although I'm a king, I'm also a warrior. I'm a dragon slayer, the god of victory. Let my staff smash your arrogant face. As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of crude clubs appeared in Meckel's hands. They were a pair of sticks that appeared amidst the storm and lightning. Although its appearance was extremely crude, the wind and lightning flashing back and forth on it brought about waves of fluctuations, causing the space to tremble. Ha 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 ha. Veleslana also laughed out loud because of his excessive excitement. The cloak behind him fluttered, and an extremely terrifying curse power rose with his petite body as the center. Come on! The king of the Mediterranean. The heavy atmosphere in the air exploded at the slightest touch. Just as the ever-victorious war god and the king of gods were about to engage in a devastating battle, a slightly frivolous voice rang out. If that's the case, can you count me in? The voice was very soft, so soft that it was covered by the storm in less than a second. However, whether it was Veleslana or Meckel, they were not ordinary people. They were the highest gods in the myths, so naturally, they couldn't miss it. At that moment, Veleslana and Meckel both stopped what they were doing and turned their heads to look in the direction of the island. There, in mid-air, a figure with two pairs of light wings made of black light behind his back braved the storm and entered the eyes of the two gods. Veleslana was slightly startled and said in surprise. Human. Human. Meckel's voice sounded like thunder, and his sharp gaze was directly cast. A mere human, how dare you appear in front of us gods? The moment he was stared at by Veleslana and Meckel, Noah felt as if his whole body was wrapped by an invisible pressure, and his body was constantly being pulled down. Veleslana was the guardian of the people and the royal authority. Although he was not the king, he represented the royal authority itself. In addition to the great cause of protecting the people, he could make all humans accept his protection and make them submit at the same time. Meckel was the king of gods and the former king of the Mediterranean. He also had the power to make humans submit. The two of them were the highest gods in all aspects. Now, they were aiming their auras at Noah. Even if they didn't deliberately use their power, their auras and words were enough to make humans kneel down and submit to them. Unfortunately, Noah was not an ordinary human. Like Erica and Liliana, Noah had no experience of facing a god directly. However, Noah had seen Gaia and Alea, who were even more majestic than gods. In addition, in the past few days, he had been fighting with the god slayer, Tony, who was on par with the gods. Coupled with the countless battles he had experienced in the past and the temperament he had cultivated since childhood, it was impossible to make Noah submit with just their auras. Therefore, under the monstrous auras of the two gods, Noah only felt his shoulders sink. After circulating the magic in his body, he recovered. He was not affected at all. Oh. Veleslana raised an eyebrow, and his tone began to have a hint of curiosity. What an amazing dochi. You seem to be a brave warrior as well. So, I'm here to challenge you. It was unknown when Noah had grasped a completely black knight's sword in his hand. He raised it and pointed it in the direction of the two gods, declaring loudly. The two of you, do you want to fight with me? The whole place was suddenly silent. A heavy pressure spread out in the space, covering the entire world in an instant. You actually pointed your sword at me, the king of the gods. Meckel's voice had a hint of majesty and anger. Human, are you ready to atone for your sins with your death? You have the courage to challenge a god, but you should consider your own strength, boy. Veleslana glanced at Noah and smirked. In front of you is the god of victory, who is always victorious. Human, you should back down. Seeing that the two gods treated his actions as an offense instead of a challenge, Noah felt helpless even though he had expected it. Since you are a god who represents victory, then you should know what causes defeat on the battlefield, right? Noah looked directly at Velislana and said with a hint of provocation. I am indeed just a human, but I have power. Since I have power, then I have the qualifications to fight. I did not come here to compete with you in terms of status, nor to compete with you in terms of strength. I only have one goal, and that is to win. Aren't you the god of victory? Aren't you looking for defeat? Noah's voice kept echoing. It penetrated the storm and drilled into Velislana's ears. Then let's fight. I will use any means necessary. I will let you taste the taste of defeat. Hearing this, Velislana widened his eyes slightly and looked at Noah, who was stirring up a large amount of magic. He suddenly laughed, and laughed very happily. Good. I didn't expect a human to know the true meaning of victory. As the god of war who is always victorious, I can't ignore the challenge of a warrior who pursues victory. Come with me. Knowing that his provocation was successful, Noah controlled the magician behind him and his body turned into a stream of light and swept in another direction. My strength is weaker than yours, so I will choose a terrain that is advantageous to me to fight with you. Everything is for victory. If you are afraid, you can choose not to come. With that, Noah's body quickly disappeared into the storm. Velislana's face was filled with joy. His body suddenly turned into a tornado and swept in the direction where Noah disappeared. Human. God of war. Are you trying to abandon me, the king? Mekl shouted angrily. Unforgivable. As soon as he finished speaking, Mekl's huge body turned into a flash of lightning and swept into the sky and disappeared. It was only then that Liliana, who was carrying Erica, leaped from the direction of the beach. This way, no matter how fierce the battle is, at least nothing will happen to this island. Liliana looked at Erica. What should we do next? Follow him. Erica answered without hesitation. We must witness this battle. Liliana nodded heavily and flew into the sky. Chapter 472. Whoosh! Accompanied by a sharp sound, Noah turned into a stream of light under the push of the magician in the form of Death Feather. He flashed through space and shot toward the endless sea. Noah didn't look behind him, nor did he check if his target was following him. Noah flew forward as fast as he could while in the Death Feather form. At the same time, he activated his sensing ability to scan the surrounding sea surface. Not long after, Noah opened his eyes and looked at a small island in front of him. It was an uninhabited island. If gods like Velislana and Mekl went all out, sinking an island wouldn't be a difficult task. Although Noah didn't think that the two highest-level gods would go all out against him, other than being provoked by him, they were also each other's opponents. It was too dangerous for two gods to fight head-on. Therefore, Noah used a trick to lure Velislana and Mekl over. As for the uninhabited island, it was the perfect place to fight with the gods. At that moment, Noah made up his mind. The tip of the magician's wings in the form of Death Feather spurted out a large amount of black light, making the wings of light bigger and more solid. It pushed Noah and shot toward the uninhabited island. After a while, Noah came to the sky above the uninhabited island. He swooped down and landed heavily on the beach. Bang! The rough landing made a muffled sound on the beach, and sand flew everywhere. Noah, who was standing on the beach, raised his head and looked in front of him. Whoosh! A gust of strong wind appeared out of nowhere and slowly swirled around, turning into the appearance of a 14 or 15-year-old boy. So this is the battlefield you've chosen. The war god, who had never lost a battle, scanned his surroundings with ease. It doesn't look like a trap, but maybe there's something I haven't noticed. Yes, it's an advantageous terrain if it's not discovered by the enemy. If it's discovered, it's just a weakness. Can you give me defeat here? Brat! Before Noah could answer, the sky was suddenly covered by a thick layer of dark clouds. Boom! A deafening clap of thunder rang out, and a bolt of lightning descended from the sky. It landed on the sea beside Noah and LoveLore, and while it stirred up huge waves, it slowly turned into a tall giant. Human. War god. The divine king with the crude staff let out a thunderous roar. Making a fool out of me as a king is a crime. You will pay with your lives. Ha 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 ha. As if he was delighted by the upcoming battle, LoveLore laughed out loud. Against the warrior who pursues victory and the king of the gods. Interesting. Interesting. I can finally feel my blood boiling. After saying that, LoveLore's eyes stared at Noah, and his smile became ferocious because of his excessive enthusiasm for battle. On the battlefield, it's common sense to eliminate the weak in advance. Kid, let's start with you. As soon as the words fell, LoveLore turned into a gust of wind and rushed in the direction of Noah. Noah's eyes narrowed, and the light wings behind him shook. His body forcibly twisted, and just as he was about to retreat, the gust of wind surged out in an extremely strange manner. Like an invisible rope, it wrapped around Noah like lightning. LoveLore has 10 incarnations. Among them, the incarnation of strong wind can cause tornadoes. The speed of the gust of wind was extremely fast, and it caught up with Noah in the blink of an eye. Like a silkworm cocoon, it wrapped Noah in it. Poof! However, in the next second, a slight sound echoed. In the gust of wind, a figure shot out and rushed out of the range of the gust of wind. Oh! In the rolling gust of wind, LoveLore's voice slowly sounded. You are indeed brave and skilled in battle. If this was in ancient times, I would have bestowed you with divine protection and allowed you to enter the battlefield for my constant victories. Now, continue to display your martial prowess in front of me. Suddenly, the gust of wind quickly rose into the air and swept straight in the direction of Noah. Hearing the sound of the wind coming from below, Noah hurriedly lowered his head, and immediately his expression changed. The light wings behind him flapped, and his figure quickly retreated. Although temporarily retreating for victory is not a cowardly act, blindly retreating is too boring. Human, don't let me down. The speed of the gust of wind immediately increased again, and in the blink of an eye, it blew in front of Noah. Looking at the approaching gust of wind, Noah remained silent and just flapped his wings to escape. In the sky above the beach of the uninhabited island, a figure and a gust of wind were chasing each other, and the distance between the two was rapidly closing. At this time, the anger in the heart of another god had reached its limit. Human. Military god. You dare to ignore me, a king. Mecca angrily attacked. Whoosh! The stick in his hand seemed to turn into an illusory flash of lightning, and Mecca swung it out like a windmill. With the momentum of Mount Tai, in the midst of the heavy explosion, it brought a sharp force that made Noah's skin prickle, and smashed down on Noah's body. Although Mecca's body was huge, his speed was as fast as lightning. By the time Noah noticed the attack, the gigantic cudgel that seemed to blot out the sky was already less than half a meter away from him. Whang! Just as Mecca's attack was about to land on Noah's body, Noah's bandaged arms suddenly burst with a bright golden light. Roar! Amidst a resounding roar that seemed to come from ancient memories, a golden beast shot out from the golden light. Like a meteor, it viciously slammed into the descending cudgel. Dong! The terrifying sound of the collision shook the air, causing a burst of sharp explosions, and caused a violent shock wave. Suddenly, Mecca's stick was forcibly pushed back, and the golden beast was like a rubber ball that had been slapped away, rapidly falling to the ground. This sudden turn of events caused LoveLore and Mecca, who had turned into a gust of wind to chase after Noah, to stop and look down. Over there, the golden wolf, whose beautiful fur fluttered in the wind. Her entire body seemed to be surrounded by golden light as she stood there with an indomitable spirit. Her entire body reflected the golden light, and at a glance, she was extremely beautiful and noble. The golden wolf was naturally Bio, who had been sleeping in Noah's body all this time. Facing the two gods of disobedience, Noah was not arrogant enough to think that he could deal with them alone. So when Mecca joined the battle, Noah did not hesitate to release Bio. Bio's appearance surprised both Welslana and Mecca. A divine beast. It doesn't seem to be one. To be able to block the attack of the divine king, its power has already surpassed that of a divine beast. Welslana's surprised voice sounded from the gust of wind. A beast that isn't a divine beast actually has that kind of power. Mecca, who had used the identity of Baal to kill the dragon king Yamu, could see that Bio was not simple, but he still spoke angrily. "Do you want to challenge me, the dragon hunter?" Roar! Bio raised his emerald eyes and stared at the tall giant. With a long roar, his body suddenly shone with golden light. As the golden light bloomed, Bio's body was like an inflated balloon, rapidly expanding. Originally, he was only half the size of a human, but in a moment, he had become a monster that was even bigger than Mecca. As his body grew larger, a vigorous golden light slowly overflowed from Bio's body, causing the space around Bio to ripple like water. Welslana was surprised at first, but then he smiled happily. "Like me, you have the ability to change your body at will." Bio was a fantasy breed that was born from miracles, fantasies, and mysteries. Its form was not fixed, so it could indeed change into various forms like Welslana. Roar! After transforming into a gigantic body, Bio's originally bewitching gem-like beast eyes finally had some of the ferocity that originally belonged to him. He opened his gigantic mouth and with a resounding roar, he pounced towards the similarly gigantic Mecca. Bio was a true immortal. It definitely wouldn't be a problem for him to entangle Mecca. Chapter 473. Looking at Bio, who was rushing towards Mecca, Noah's wings of light flapped behind him. After retreating a distance, he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was still Bio. Otherwise, no matter how confident Noah was, he wouldn't dare to say that he could kill one of the gods in a battle between two of the highest-level gods. On the shore of the uninhabited island, the huge man and beast finally collided. Ha! With a roar, Mecca raised his hand and swung the huge stick in his hand. It cut through the void, leaving a long afterimage in the space. Roar! The moment Mecca made his move, Bio also suddenly raised his head and let out a loud and resounding roar. His huge body directly collided with Mecca. After a moment, under Noah's gaze, the man and beast collided with a loud bang. Dong! At the moment of collision, a thunderous explosion resounded through the sky. As soon as he came into contact with Bio, Mecca adopted his most ferocious close combat style. The pair of rods in his hands were as thick as mountains, and as he waved them around, they brought about a series of sharp sounds as they broke through the air. Gales and flashes of lightning appeared as he continuously attacked Bio. Although Bio's body had become bigger, his speed hadn't decreased at all. Instead, it gave him an extremely large amount of power. As he collided with Mecca, his terrifying power seemed to break through the void. He rushed towards Mecca again and again, entangling with Mecca. Suddenly, the entire sea was like boiling water under the collision of the man and beast. It rolled back and forth, causing waves to explode. Welslana had returned to the appearance of a teenager. Welslana, who had the power to transform into 10 different avatars, now had the appearance of a teenager. Not only was he a human, but he also had the appearance of a 15-year-old teenager. It was one of Welslana's 10 avatars, the avatar of a teenager. In order to maintain the order of the chaotic world, in the legends, Welslana liked to use the avatar of a teenager when he was fighting against the enemy gods. This was because, among the people and royalty that Welslana protected, this avatar was the symbol of a hero. Under this incarnation, Welslana could obtain the power of protection and domination. Thus, when the huge waves stirred up by the fierce battle between Mecher and Bio surged in his direction, Welslana shouted softly, "Back off!" The word spirit of blessing and domination was the incarnation of the hero, the power of the youth. Therefore, under this order, when the rolling waves surged in front of Welslana, they suddenly separated on their own. It was as if there was an invisible barrier separating the seawater, so that the space within 2 meters of Welslana was like a vacuum, not being submerged by the seawater. "So you have such a guardian beast." Welslana looked strangely at Bio, who was entangled with Mecher. It seemed that the fight between Bio and Mecher had ignited his desire to fight. He looked at Noah with burning eyes. "Then, should we begin?" Hearing this, Noah, who was floating in the air, silently lowered his body and pointed the knight's sword at Welslana. "Unlike Bio, I don't have the ability to transform. Let me use the sword in my hand to challenge you, the god of victory." "Sword?" Welslana suddenly smiled. "Although I, who have 10 incarnations, rely on the power of transformation to be able to grasp victory in any battle, but no matter what, I once had the title of a hero. As the god of war, and the protector of the people, if you challenge me with a sword, how can I not show you my skills?" After saying that, Welslana reached out his hand, as if he was holding something, and stretched it straight to his side. "Sword! Come to my hand." Under the word spirit of domination, on the beach, a burst of sand suddenly rose up, and gradually condensed into a sand sword in Welslana's hand. Holding the sand sword in his hand, an extremely domineering aura suddenly erupted from Welslana's body. This aura was so strong that it made Noah feel a little suffocated. With the huge amount of curse power that belonged to God gushing out from Welslana's body, the sand sword made of sand seemed to become more solid. It also burst out like a flash of cold light on the edge of the sword, which made Noah's heart tighten. Although he didn't directly face the sand sword, Noah didn't doubt that even if his knight's sword hit it with full force, there wouldn't be a single crack on the sand sword. Under the support of the word spirit of domination and the huge amount of curse power from Welslana's incarnation, the sand sword became a true divine weapon in the sense of the word. This kind of skill could be called a divine skill. Sure enough, this was something that only God could do. No need to be polite." Welslana calmly smiled. "Show your bravery in front of me." Hearing this, the magic power that flowed in Noah's body like a surging lake also rolled up, making Noah's arm tremble. The knight's sword, in his hand, pointed diagonally to the ground, and an extremely huge amount of magic power lingered on it, bringing an invisible hot wind, causing the air around the sword to fluctuate. Then, looking up slowly, looking at Welslana, who was also possessed by the curse power, Noah's eyes flashed. "I won't be polite." After saying that, Noah's figure instantly turned into a blurry black shadow, and the faint sound of the engine driving echoed from the death feather form of magician behind Noah, allowing Noah to charge forward with an imposing manner towards the motionless Welslana. During the burst, a magic line like electric wires spread out from Noah's body, covering Noah's hand, and also covered the knight's sword and the death feather form of a magician, bringing a wave of fluctuation. That was enhance magic. With the enhance magic strengthening, Noah's arm strength would increase, the knight's sword would also become sharper, and the death feather form of a magician would burst out with more ferocious speed, directly increasing Noah's strength, and speed. In addition to the rune of knight's sword and magician strengthening, Noah's slash and speed increased several times. The knight's sword, in his hand, cut through the air like a flash of black lightning, carrying a fierce wind that caused the space to fluctuate, and fiercely chopped down at the motionless Welslana in front of him. The strength of the force was so strong that even the air under the sword was expelled, bringing a low sonic boom that lingered in the ears. The strong wind pressure made the ancient Roman-like clothes on Welleslana's body tightly stick to his skin, but the sculpture-like artistic face was not moved by the fierce, knight's sword, in the slightest. Looking at the knight's sword that was getting closer and closer, when the knight's sword was only half a meter away from his head, Welleslana's feet moved very casually and gently. Swish! The pitch-black knight's sword suddenly fell and brushed past Welleslana's shoulder. At this moment, Welleslana suddenly raised the sand sword surrounded by a huge spell, slightly bent it, and suddenly stabbed in the direction of the knight's sword. Ding! The seemingly random sand sword accurately touched the knight's sword at the moment when it brushed past Welleslana's shoulder. Clang! A powerful force burst out from the sand sword, and the knight's sword was pushed up, making Noah, who was holding the sword, exposed a big gap, and even his body lost its balance. Not bad. Welleslana smiled calmly. His hand that was holding the sword slightly bent, and he lifted the sand sword that was surrounded by a huge amount of curse power. His arm shook, and the sand sword brought along a cold wind as it mercilessly pierced towards Noah's chest. But, it's still not enough to challenge a god. Noah suddenly reacted in an instant. The light wings on his back suddenly shook, making Noah's body that lost its balance turn half a circle. Holding the knight's sword tightly, the surging magic quickly condensed on the sword, and fiercely slashed out. Just in time, it collided with the sand sword that was thrusting violently. Clang! The pitch-black knight's sword and the sand sword suddenly collided fiercely, and a crisp sound of weapons clashing suddenly sounded at the point of contact, stirring up ripples that caused the atmosphere to fluctuate. Chapter 474. Clank. The collision between the knight's sword and the sand sword made a loud sound of weapons clashing reverberate in all directions like an echo, and it even caused a burst of sparks to fly in all directions. Under the push of the light wings behind him, Noah quickly retreated, leaving a series of afterimages in the air. He raised his head and looked at Welleslana, who was still as motionless as a mountain, and frowned deeply. Welleslana had 10 avatars. The 10 avatars had 10 different abilities, so Welleslana could change his form and ability to fight under any circumstances, and lead the battle to his advantage. Just like Alusha, Welleslana could use the most advantageous and useful avatars to restrain the enemy under the most suitable circumstances. But until now, other than using the avatar of Strong Wind at the beginning, Welleslana had only used the avatar of Young Man to deal with Noah's battle. Even so, in a head-on collision, Welleslana's strength still firmly suppressed Noah's. The battle situation was indeed quite unfavorable for Noah. However, Welleslana seemed to still be observing Noah until now, as if he wanted to know how far Noah could go if he tried his best. In other words, Welleslana was not serious at all. Although he was stimulated by Noah's pursuit of victory and accepted Noah's challenge as the god of victory, Welleslana obviously did not treat Noah as a real opponent. He did not use the avatar's power, nor was he serious. It could not be said that Welleslana saw through Noah, but Welleslana had not made the judgment that he needed to use that level of power, and was just testing Noah's strength. This is good. The more careless you are with me, in the end, the more smoothly my plan can be carried out. Taking a deep breath of the slightly cool air, Noah stared at Welleslana, who looked calm, and held the knight's sword in his hand. The magician, in the form of Death Feather, behind Noah's magician, and the rune magic runes lit up at the same time. Pang! The black light gushing out from the tip of the wings suddenly increased, explosively increasing the performance, generating a huge thrust, making Noah's body almost turn into a black line, sticking close to the ground, and exploding in the direction of Welleslana. Welleslana suddenly raised his eyebrows, and calmly raised the sand sword in his hand, facing Noah, and prepared to give Noah a head-on blow. However, in the next moment, a scene that surprised Welslana happened. Go! Noah's eyes, and the knight in his hand suddenly, and the knight sword suddenly, Noah, Noah. On the body of the Dark Knight's sword, the enhanced magic pattern and the rune magic rune also lit up. With the help of the enhanced magic and the speed rune, the pitch-black knight's sword turned into a blurry shadow. It flashed through the air like a bolt of lightning, and with a faint whistling sound, it shot towards Welslana. Noah's sudden throwing attack made Welslana's eyes flash with a touch of surprise, but his face was still calm. Facing the sharp knight's sword that shot toward him, Welslana did not retreat, but instead, he raised the sand sword in his hand and slashed at the blurry shadow. At this moment, the knight's sword that turned into a blurry shadow suddenly disappeared. As if directly penetrating through space, the black knight's sword disappeared in an instant, and suddenly appeared in the fluctuation of space. However, when it appeared again, the black knight's sword had already arrived in front of Welslana, and it fiercely stabbed toward his chest. This is... Welslana's pupils shrank, and his expression became serious. The extraordinary eyesight belonging to the gods allowed him to see the truth of this phenomenon. Did he shorten the distance? At this time, the sand sword in Welslana's hand had already slashed out, and he could not withdraw it. He did use his brain. The huge spell that was originally lingering on the sand sword instantly rushed to Welslana's other hand, and that hand was covered by a pale golden light. However, you can't defeat me with this kind of trick. After saying that, Welslana suddenly stretched out his hand, and directly grabbed the knight's sword that shot toward him like lightning, and he directly grabbed the sharp blade of the knight's sword. Clang! When the sharp weapon suddenly came into contact with Welslana's hand, it actually caused a crisp sound that was like the sound of weapons colliding with each other. Welslana, who directly held the knight's sword, shook his hand heavily, and the force carried by the sword was dissolved by him, and he easily received Noah's surprise attack. And since Welslana knew that the knight's sword had the ability to control the distance, it meant that the same trick would no longer work. However, Noah was not shocked, but happy, and his eyes completely lit up. Wanton plunder. Black Tea King. When the spell that released the true power of the knight's sword sounded, that knight's sword that was directly held in Welslana's hand shook, and a blue flame burst out like an explosion. Suddenly, Welslana's face changed. Because Welslana felt it. Although the flame on the knight's sword that was burning with blue flames did not bring any heat, the spell that was originally flowing very smoothly in his body suddenly became chaotic, and regardless of Welslana's control, it rolled up. Then, at this moment, Welslana felt that something in his body flowed into the knight's sword, and was absorbed by the knight's sword. Welslana was shocked, and he reflexively let go of the knight's sword in his hand. The knight's sword that was burning with blue flames suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already back in Noah's hand. Success! Feeling the power of the knight's sword, Noah fiercely controlled the death feather form of the magician to soar into the sky and shouted. Bo! Bo, who was dealing with Mekr, suddenly flashed his ferocious beast eyes. Roar! It was unknown how many times it had been hit by Mekl's club, but its huge body suddenly turned into a bright meteor. It circled in the air, and before Mekl could react, it fiercely hit Mekl's back. Bang! Along with a muffled sound, Mekr's huge body was directly knocked back, and fell in the direction of the beach. Needless to say, Welslana happened to be there. Welslana, who did not expect this to happen, was shocked, and then his body was buried by Mekr, who was like a heavy mountain. Boom! In the loud sound, Mekr's huge body fell on the beach, and the sand on the beach exploded in all directions like waves. Roar! Bo, who had turned into a meteor, flew above Makar and transformed back into his golden wolf form. His body swelled up again, becoming a few times bigger. Then, he fiercely landed on the ground, smashing into Makar's body. Bang! In the muffled sound of the impact, the heavy and powerful limbs suddenly fell on Makar's body, and the bones in Makar's body were unable to bear the weight. Damn golden beast! Makar's angry roar resounded through the sky. At the same time, taking advantage of the moment when Bio restrained Makar, Noah rushed to the sky, and stopped in the sky above the uninhabited island. His body, like a gust of wind, surged with a huge magic explosion, and swept out like an explosion. Hum! A burst of golden light, more dazzling than the golden wolf Bio's, suddenly rose from Noah's body. In the crisp sound of paw, Noah fiercely closed his palms, and a gorgeous magic array immediately spun out from his closed palms. The magic that turned into a dazzling golden light suddenly surged into the rotating magic array, and the brilliant magic array's hub fiercely lit up. Hum! The space around the uninhabited island shook. Bright pillars of light suddenly rose from all around the uninhabited island, and rushed to the sky, surrounding the entire uninhabited island. Chapter 475. Wang. Along with the sound of space vibrating, a bright beam of light shot up into the sky, surrounding the uninhabited island and releasing a huge amount of magic. Makar, who was temporarily suppressed by Bio, gripped Bio's neck. The muscles on his huge body bulged, and even his veins began to bulge. With a furious roar, he slowly pushed away Bio, who had used his body to suppress him, who was slowly suppressing him. Whoosh! At the same time, a gust of wind began to blow from behind Makar's huge body. It passed through Makar's huge body and drilled its way out. Needless to say, it was Welslana, who had used the strong wind incarnation. Although he was affected by Noah and Bio's surprise attack, Welslana naturally wouldn't die just because of Makar's attack. It was more likely that he didn't even suffer the slightest bit of damage. However, Noah didn't let Bio suddenly attack to use Makar to attack Welslana. What Noah wanted to do was to wipe out Welslana and Mekl in one fell swoop. Wang! Rich golden light bloomed from Noah's palms and the beautiful magic formation rotating in front of his palms, illuminating the sky of the uninhabited island. Noah yelled as he mobilized most of the magic power in his body and let it flow into the magic array like a flood that had been opened from a dam. Fairy Sphere. Activate! The pillars of light surrounding the uninhabited island suddenly bloomed with a strong light. In the next instant, with the uninhabited island as the center, the pillars of light that rose into the sky suddenly scattered, turning into a layer of halo, forming a huge bright transparent sphere that surrounded the entire uninhabited island. Taking a closer look, the surface of this huge sphere had the image of a fairy with its wings spread out. What is this? The sudden change made Makar, who was still wrestling with Bio, stunned. Is this the method you prepared for victory? Welslana, who had turned into a gust of wind and gradually drilled out of Makar's huge body, let out a joyful shout. But, warrior, unless it's an ancient god-killing spell, spells won't work on us. Ah! I know. Of course I know. Noah, who was floating in the air, suddenly swooped down. Therefore, this fairy sphere is not used to deal with you directly. It is only used to confine everything that happens next within it. Saying this, Noah swooped down in front of the huge sphere and put his hand on it. Fairy Sphere, and Fairy Tale, were the last super spells of the three great spells, and were known as the Absolute Defense spell. It could condense the thoughts of all the guild members of Fairy Tale into powerful magic and create an invincible protective sphere. It had the ability to protect everything within its effective range, and could even freeze time within the effective range of the magic. In this world, there was naturally no such thing as a Fairy Tale guild members yearning to condense a powerful magic power. So, Noah used his own vast magic as a medium to replace the thoughts of the guild members of Fairy Tale and activated the fairy sphere. But this way, the ability to freeze time would not be effective. Activating this magic, Noah did not use it to protect Wells, Lana and Mecker, but to restrict everything that happened next to the sphere. This way, Noah could unscrupulously use a killing move that could even affect him. Bang! Without hesitation, Noah used all the magic in his body, and like a gust of wind, it exploded in all directions. Magic full release. Enduring the pain brought to his body after mobilizing the inhumanly huge magic power, Noah gritted his teeth and let out a low growl. Everything. Shatter for me. At this moment, all the violent and vast magic belonging to Noah turned into a gorgeous white light, flowing into the huge sphere through Noah's hand. Of course, Noah did not use the shatter magic to shatter the huge sphere. Under Noah's control, the brilliant white light that was injected into the giant sphere not only did not affect the giant sphere itself, but also dyed the entire giant sphere pure white. Wang! In the next instant, the entire interior of the huge sphere was covered by a dazzling white light that soared up like a tide. Under the cover of that gorgeous white light, the space of the entire uninhabited island began to tremble. Clang! The rich light flickered and made a vibrating sound. The entire uninhabited island, which was covered by the brilliant white light, was suddenly completely split into pieces of extremely orderly cubes, including the trees, ground, mountains, and rivers on the uninhabited island. Immediately after, the entire uninhabited island suddenly exploded. Dong! Amidst the earth-shattering sound, the space inside the huge sphere underwent earth-shattering changes. The uninhabited island exploded and turned into fragments, instantly disappearing in the long river of history. Bang! Relying on his huge body to temporarily suppress Mecker, Beowulf's entire body was shattered under the full power of the shatter. Kacha kacha! Even the space within the huge sphere started to crack. Under the effect of Noah's shatter, using all of his magic power, it was as if the space within the sphere was shattering like glass, shattering piece by piece. In other words, except for Wales, Lana and Mecker, who were immune to all spells, as the highest level gods, everything inside the huge sphere was shattered. Boom! The space that exploded directly turned into a bottomless black abyss, bringing with it gusts of turbulence that swept across the entire huge sphere. That was no ordinary atmospheric turbulence, but spatial turbulence. If an ordinary person were to touch it, they would be annihilated immediately. This spatial turbulence swept out like a storm, and when it came into contact with the huge sphere, it caused the huge sphere to tremble. Crack, crack. The entire huge sphere also began to crack under the sweeping of the spatial turbulence. Seeing this, Noah's expression changed and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He frantically poured the magic in his body into the huge sphere, desperately trying to maintain the existence of the fairy sphere. If it weren't for the huge sphere, Noah would definitely have died once he was swept out by the spatial turbulence. Oh, 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 oh. Ah, ah, ah. Within the range of the huge sphere, in the pitch-black space where everything had been destroyed, Velaslana and Mecker let out a loud cry at the same time. Their bodies were directly swept into the turbulent space and dragged into the pitch-black space crack. Should it be said that they were indeed gods in myths? The spatial turbulence that ordinary people would be destroyed with a touch swept over the bodies of these two highest-level gods, but it did not bring them any harm. It only made them unable to control their bodies as they were swept into the depths of the spatial crack. If this continued, even if these two gods did not die, they would be directly exiled into the depths of the infinite space and wander endlessly. But, was it that easy? You want to deal with me, the king of the gods, with this level of power? Mecker roared. Don't be delusional. Human. After saying that, Mecker's huge body directly turned into a bolt of lightning, rushing out against the spatial turbulence. Ha 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 ha. Wails Lana also laughed loudly. This is the power you prepared for victory. A power that can even shatter space is indeed amazing. But this is not enough for me to taste the taste of defeat. After saying that, Wails Lana's body turned into a gust of wind, colliding with the surrounding spatial turbulence and slowly blowing outwards. Seeing that Wails Lana and Mecher were using their magical powers to break through the spatial turbulence and break out, Noah's heart was filled with shock. Can't this deal with them? Should I say, as expected of a god? Chapter 476. Whoosh! Violent spatial turbulence continued to engulf the area of effect of the fairy sphere. Rumble. In the dark world where even space was annihilated, waves of destructive waves rolled back and forth, attacking in all directions. Kacha! Kacha Kacha, the fairy sphere, which was known as an absolute defense spell, was swept away by the spatial turbulence. Along with the sound of cracking, cracks began to appear on the surface of the fairy sphere. In such a situation, a human and two gods began to fight with their lives on the line. Ah! Noah frantically poured the magic in his body into the fairy sphere, maintaining the existence of the fairy sphere so that the spatial turbulence would not affect him. Oh! Mecher, who had transformed into a bolt of lightning, kept rushing out. Against the spatial turbulence that could kill an ordinary person, he let out a furious roar. Ah! Even Wails Lana, who had turned into a gust of wind, seemed to have begun to fight with his life on the line. He carried an extremely terrifying curse power, attacking the surrounding spatial turbulence and attacking outside. In a sense, this human and two gods were challenging their own limits, just to survive in this chaotic battle. Seeing Wails Lana, who had transformed into a gust of wind, and Mecher, who had transformed into a bolt of lightning, unwaveringly attacking this side under the sweeping of the spatial turbulence, Noah's eyes also showed a look of madness. Soon, they would be able to break free from the sweeping of the spatial turbulence and break through the fairy sphere that was riddled with holes in one breath. They would be out of danger, and a look of madness appeared in Noah's eyes. Although directly shattering the space and exiling Wails Lana and Mecher into the spatial turbulence, as long as the plan went smoothly, it should be able to bury any opponent. But if the opponent was a god, Noah had not thought of the possibility of failure. In order to deal with this, Noah had previously prepared another method, which was to let Bo deal with Mecher, while he himself faced Wails Lana. At that moment, Noah fiercely raised the knight's sword in his other hand, and with a stab, the knight's sword pierced through one of the cracks in the fairy sphere. Bang! In the next moment, the surging flames on the knight's sword soared. Release for me! Noah's low voice resounded through the sky. Black Tea King! As soon as the voice fell, the pitch-black knight's sword suddenly turned golden, and even the flames on the sword turned into golden flames, crazily rising. What? Seeing this scene, Wails Lana, who had turned into a gust of wind, was shocked. Could that be? As the god of victory, Wails Lana had 10 incarnations. Strong wind, bull, white horse, camel, mountain boar, boy, phoenix, herding sheep, goat, and finally, human warrior with a golden sword. There were a total of 10 incarnations, and each incarnation had a different power. After learning from Liliana what kind of power Wails Lana's 10 incarnations had, Noah planned to use the Black Tea King to steal the power of one of the incarnations. The most powerful of Wails Lana's 10 incarnations was the White Horse. In mythology and ancient times, the existence of the horse had a close relationship with the sun from the beginning. In almost all myths, the sun god who represented the sun sat in a carriage, carried by horses, and traveled from east to west. This was commonly passed down in many civilizations. East, India, Northern Europe, China, Babylon. Without exception. Even the Greek Apollo was like this. Just like Apollo, in Persian mythology, the god of light, Mitra, who represented the light, also praised the same myth. Lana was the undefeated military god who served Mitra, the incarnation of the sun. Therefore, Lana, who served Mitra, could transform into a white horse, carry the sun, and drive the flames from the sun. While dealing with Lana, Noah took advantage of Lana's carelessness and used the Black Tea King to steal Lana's incarnation of the white horse. Now, it was time to release the incarnation of the white horse. Burn it all up for me, gods. When Noah burst out such a roar, the expanding golden flames burning on the knight's sword suddenly stagnated, and then suddenly burst out. Nay! A horse's cry echoed in the dark space turbulence. The flames from the sun turned into a majestic white horse shining with golden light. Amidst the horse's neigh, it carried the overwhelming golden flames and fell like a meteor from the sky, rubbing against the spatial turbulence that swept up and abruptly landing on the gale and lightning that were charging outwards. Bang! The surging flames of the sun burst out like an explosion, covering every corner of the space turbulence with a sea of golden flames. The scorching heat caused the space turbulence to become even more violent, and rushed in all directions of the pitch-black world. Oh! The wind that was directly covered by the sun's flames returned to the form when Lana used the incarnation of the youth, and Mekhl, who turned into lightning, also returned to the tall giant form in the flames. Under the burning of the flames, both of them let out painful screams. If they were in their peak state, then it would not be difficult for Lana and Mekhl to block the power of the incarnation of Lana. However, under the sweeping of the space turbulence, Lana and Mekhl could not protect themselves, and in order to rush out of the space turbulence, they used a lot of curse power, and did not have any power left to block the power of the white horse. Under the burning of the fire from the sun, Lana and Mekhl's bodies melted like candles. Under such circumstances, the two gods of the highest level actually laughed, and they laughed with extreme pleasure. Have you let my incarnation fail? Lana no longer made any resistance, and let his body gradually collapse under the sweeping of the sun's flames and space turbulence. His eyes shot straight to Noah, who was outside the huge sphere, and he laughed heartily. How amazing! Warrior! I admit that this is my failure, but there will not be a next time. Mekhl's deafening thunder sounded. King of the God Slayer! You have defeated the King of the Gods, Mekhl. Be proud of it. Then become stronger. Lana reached out to Noah, his eyes full of undying fighting spirit. Let my power become thy food. Until I appear in front of thee again. Have the power to obtain victory in any battle. Leaving these words, Lana and Mekhl's figures were buried by the golden flames and dark turbulence, and they disappeared. At the same time, Noah felt two huge forces suddenly flowed into his body, mixed with the almost exhausted magic power in his body, and violently tumbled. The two huge forces that appeared out of nowhere were like overbearing invaders. Not only did they occupy Noah's body, but they also provoked the little remaining magic power in Noah and caused a conflict. Under such a conflict, Noah's knight's sword and revolver, the two weapons in his soul, suddenly disappeared from Noah's body, turned into pure power, and mixed with all the forces in his body, stirring up all the forces in his body. In the end, even Bio, who had returned to Noah's body, turned into pure power and joined the chaotic battle. In other words, all the forces in Noah's body were in conflict, and some kind of change occurred. In the next moment, an unimaginable pain attacked Noah's body. Noah did not even have time to cry out in pain, his consciousness shook under the impact of the unimaginable pain, and began to dissipate. Because the revolver also turned into pure power and joined Noah's body in the chaotic battle, the death feather, form of a magician, behind Noah naturally disappeared, and let the suspended Noah fall to the sea. The moment before he completely lost consciousness, Noah felt it. Two soft and delicate bodies wrapped around him. Chapter 477. In a daze, Noah felt that there was a slender palm stroking back and forth on his body, as if it was very curious about his body. This feeling did not bring any unpleasantness to Noah. Because the palm was very slender, and the touch was very good, so no one would doubt that the owner of the palm was a man. In other words, the palm that was curiously stroking back and forth on Noah's body was a woman's hand. Under this feeling, Noah's consciousness gradually recovered, and he opened his eyes. "Oh. You're awake." This was a very light, crisp and sweet voice. The moment the voice sounded, Noah also opened his eyes, and then, a delicate girl's pretty face was imprinted into Noah's eyes. "Good morning." The human world seems to use this way to greet people who have just woken up. The girl said with a sweet smile. "So, child, I can also greet you like this, right?" Noah finally reacted when he heard this. His eyes widened as he looked at the pretty face that was just inches away from him. Immediately, he abruptly leaped up and distanced himself from the young lady. Only then did Noah realize that he was in a space that he didn't know where it was. There was nothing around, everything in sight was gray. Even to the end of the horizon, except for gray, there was nothing else. The only exception was Noah himself, and the girl who just knelt beside Noah lying on the ground. Judging from her appearance, she was at most a 14 or 15-year-old girl. The girl had an extremely upright and cute appearance. Her figure was extremely slender, and she looked very young and tender. However, she had a very seductive temperament that made people feel that she had a seductive temperament. Unconsciously, they were immersed in this feeling. Therefore, rather than using the word beautiful to describe this girl, it was better to say that she had a young face and body, long golden hair, and wearing a thin white dress. The girl was really quite cute. Noah had never seen this girl before. Therefore, Noah was sure that he did not know this person at all. Why did he appear here? Who was this girl? One question after another made Noah speak hesitantly. "You are Pandora." The girl replied in a cute tone that could have been added to the end of the sentence. "The goddess who gives all disasters and a glimmer of hope, that's me. Pandora." Noah was stunned. He pointed at the girl who called herself Pandora with a dumbfounded expression. "Are you Pandora?" It was impossible for Noah not to have heard of the name Pandora. It would not be an exaggeration to use the word most famous to describe the goddess. However, undoubtedly, this goddess was the most charming and beautiful in the myths. Although this young lady who called herself Pandora also had an indescribable charm, her figure and appearance didn't seem like the goddess of calamity at all. Pandora suddenly blinked and stared at Noah. "I feel like you're thinking about something very rude." Noah was shocked and quickly laughed dryly. "No, how could it be? What a naughty child." Pandora puffed up her cheeks. She looked so cute that it completely destroyed the image of the goddess Pandora in Noah's heart. "You can't be so rude to your mother." "Ma. Mother." Noah's mouth twitched. Pandora was the third person who claimed to be Noah's mother. The first two, Gaia and Alea, looked like they were only 10 years old. Not to mention being a mother, they might even be suitable to be Noah's daughter. Now, this person in front of him, who looked younger than him, claimed to be his mother. At this moment, Noah cursed his birth from the bottom of his heart. "I feel like you're thinking about something rude again." Pandora angrily stared at Noah. "I'm the goddess who manages the reincarnation ceremony of the God Slayer. Since you've reincarnated as a God Slayer, you're my child, and I'm your mother. Is there anything wrong with that?" God Slayer. Noah was shocked. He finally remembered everything that happened before he fainted. Yes. I killed whales Lana and Meckel. I saw that battle too. It was very exciting. Pandora's anger turned into joy. She was like a child. She got angry quickly, but her anger disappeared quickly. Among all my children, you performed the best in the battle of reincarnating as a god slayer. I didn't think that you would actually shatter the space, and banish the invincible god of war and the god king into the space turbulence. Finally, you gave them a fatal blow and killed two gods at the same time. This has never happened before. It made me want to get out of here and give you a big hug as a reward. With that, Pandora got up, rushed forward, and hugged Noah, who was stunned there. You're Noah, right? You did very well. Noah awkwardly hugged Pandora, who couldn't even touch the ground after hugging his neck because of her height. After a while, he sighed. In other words, I've really become a god slayer. Of course it's true. Pandora raised her head from Noah's arms and suddenly smiled. With the reincarnation spell left behind by Epimetheus and myself, and with the gods as the sacrifice, I have indeed transferred the power of the Welslana war god and the god king Mekker to you through a secret ritual, making you the new god slayer. After saying that, Pandora narrowed her eyes, and her expression became a little flirtatious. Faintly, whether it was her eyes or her expression, there was an extremely strong curiosity. However, your physique seems to be a little special. Hearing this, Noah was stunned. Do you know? Pandora let go of her arms around Noah's neck and landed on the ground. She raised her head and looked at Noah with an extremely strong curiosity in her eyes. Under normal circumstances, using the secret ritual of reincarnation and using the killed gods as sacrifices, the god slayer can only obtain one god's authority. However, when the secret ritual transferred the power of Welslana and Meckel into your body actually absorbed all the power of the two gods and mixed it with your own power, resulting in a great change. Noah was stunned at first, and then he was speechless. If such a thing really happened, then it was indeed Noah's physique that caused trouble. Although Noah was a human, he had the three physiques that even gods could not have. One of the three physiques was that he could absorb all the external power that entered his body for his own use, strengthening himself and increasing Noah's power. It was because of this physique that Noah could absorb all the power of Welslana and Meckel for himself. However, what was that great change about? Could it be that it was the same as when he implanted the daybreak star pattern in the world of the absolute dual blades? The power that entered his body and his physique had a strange conflict, causing his own power to change. To be able to kill two gods at the same time, even if it is inconceivable, it is not absolutely impossible. However, to be able to absorb all the power of the reincarnated gods through the secret ritual is something that I have never encountered before. Pandora moved her head closer to Noah's face. Are you hiding something? You can't lie to your mother. Looking at Pandora's extremely curious expression, as if she wanted to dissect him, Noah could only turn his head away and avoid her gaze. You are such a naughty child. Pandora's cheeks puffed up, but after a while, it returned to a cute smile. Forget it. Although I don't know what kind of changes the power of the god of war and Meckel have caused in your body, it must be good for you, right? Hearing this, Noah was about to nod, but his head suddenly felt dizzy, and his vision blurred. Looks like it's time. Pandora said with a smile. Originally, you should have forgotten everything that happened here when you returned to your original world, but I don't know why this world actually accepted your existence. After you return, you shouldn't forget anything, so don't forget your mother. As soon as her voice fell, Noah's vision turned black, and he lost consciousness. Chapter 478. When Noah woke up again, a slightly familiar ceiling appeared in front of him. After sitting up, Noah found that he was lying on a bed and surrounded by the layout of a rather familiar room. If he remembered correctly, this room should be Noah's hotel room in Sardinia. Recalling the feeling of being hugged by two soft and delicate bodies before he fainted, Noah's expression slowly relaxed. Erica and Liliana. Other than Erica and Liliana, it should be impossible for anyone else to save Noah. This made Noah feel some gratitude toward Erica and Liliana. After all, if Electra and Liliana hadn't saved Noah, he would have either fallen into the sea and drowned, or he would have been swept into the spatial turbulence that broke through the fairy sphere and died without a doubt. Thinking of all the arrangements and plans he had made for that battle but almost died in the end, Noah could not help but sigh. Sure enough, killing a god is not something humans can do. With that said, Noah clearly felt that his body seemed to be different from before. Pandora said that when the power of Welslana and Mekar entered Noah's body, the power in Noah's body seemed to have undergone a great change. Thinking of this, Noah frowned, closed his eyes, and sank his consciousness into his body. Then, Noah discovered the changes in his body. First of all, Noah's bones now became harder than iron, perhaps harder than any alloy in the world. Secondly, rather than saying that the muscle fibers in Noah's body had hardened, it was better to say that they had become more difficult to tear. Coupled with the physique of a god slayer that he had learned from others, Noah had no doubt that once he entered a combat state, his body would instantly burst forth with a more powerful ability than adrenaline, allowing his body to enter the most perfect combat state and exert his greatest strength. Of course, the most significant change in Noah's body was that from today onwards, except for spells that were effective against gods, all other magic would be completely ineffective against him. Whether it was beneficial or not. This was a physical change. Furthermore, Noah felt that his strength had also undergone a significant change. The most intuitive manifestation was that Noah's originally extremely huge magic power had increased exponentially, at least 3 times. As for the others, such as the 2 weapons lodging in Noah's soul, some of the power that Noah could have used, and even the golden wolf bio, all disappeared. No. It did not disappear. Instead, it completely fused with a power sleeping in Noah's body. It was a power called authority. The power in Noah's body that originally belonged to Welslana, Mekal, and a part of his own power had all fused together, forming an authority. Like Welslana, it could change into 10 avatars of authority. However, due to the fusion of Mekal and Noah's own power, these 10 avatars had also changed. Sensing this change, Noah sent his consciousness, which had sunk into his body, deeper. Immediately, he saw an ancient stone plate. Around the stone plate, there were 10 patterns connected. That was the new authority that was born after the fusion of Noah, Welslana, and Mekal's power. Sinking his consciousness into the stone plate, a large amount of memories poured into Noah's mind, allowing Noah to instantly obtain the information of the 10 avatars. Storm, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's strong wind avatar and Mekal's storm. It could cause a strong storm, and to a certain extent, it could dominate the sky and summon a storm. Giant, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's bull avatar and Mekal's appearance. When using this avatar, one could obtain a strange power that far exceeded the limits, and its power was enough to split mountains and rivers. White Horse, an avatar from Welslana, able to summon the white horse that carried the sun and exorcise the flames from the sun. Dragon Man, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's camel avatar and Mekal's dragon slayer avatar. When using this avatar, not only could one obtain a close combat ability that surpassed wild instincts and intuition, but could also transform one's body into a dragon's physique, obtaining a body that was comparable to a giant dragon's. To a certain extent, it could restrain dragon-type creatures and cause great damage to dragon-type creatures. Golden Wolf, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welslana's mountain boar avatar and the crush magic. It could summon the Golden Wolf bio. Under this avatar, the Golden Wolf bio not only had his own original transformation ability, but also had the powerful charging ability of the mountain boar avatar. It could create a shockwave that could crush everything. When using this avatar, the user could also obtain the ability to crush everything. Priest, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welleslana's youth avatar and Noah's rune magic. When using this avatar, one could obtain the ability to protect and dominate, shelter and make humans obey. Only when using this avatar, the user could use the rune magic. Combined with the authority itself, not only did the rune magic increase the power of the rune magic, but it also became independent. It no longer needed to be in contact with the magic base to use magic of the authority level. Phoenix, an authority that came from Welleslana, able to obtain speed that surpassed everything. Elf, an avatar formed by the fusion of Welleslana's shepherd avatar and Noah's regenerative ability strengthened by the protozoan virus. No matter how serious the injury was, as long as it caused damage to the body, it could be expelled in a very short period of time, allowing the user to recover to their original state. Thunder, an avatar formed by combining Welleslana's goat avatar and Meckel's lightning authority. It could summon thunderclouds that formed lightning, and it could also turn the user into lightning, gaining the ability to control lightning. Warrior, an avatar from Welleslana, a fusion of Noah's knight's sword and revolver. When the avatar has sufficient knowledge of the opponent, the avatar can weave spirits and form a golden sword to attack. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. If the avatar is used as an opponent, the avatar must have sufficient knowledge of the god's own divinity. In addition, Meckel seemed to have other powers, but those powers were too complex, so they were all directly turned into pure curse power, which was used to enhance Noah's magic. To put it bluntly, Noah's current magic, curse power, was definitely stronger than other god slayers. And a lot stronger. As for the 10 avatars' powers, although strictly speaking, it could only be regarded as one power, it could be used as 10 powers. Originally, this kind of power that could use multiple powers must have very strict restrictions, but these restrictions seem to have been eliminated because Noah had absorbed all the powers of Welleslana and Meckel. Including the ability to limit, it had been completely integrated into Noah's power. When Noah did not use his power, he could enter a state of self-enhancement. Simply put, Noah's power had been redistributed. Now, without using power, Noah could only use magic bullet, strengthening magic, and the 3 major spells. The rest could only be used after using the corresponding power. For example, crush. Even if Noah still knew how to use it, there was no way to use it without using the avatar of the golden wolf. Because it had already broken away from the category of magic, it had become an ability of power. All these changes made Noah's frown deeper and deeper. Overall, my strength must have increased greatly, but there are pros and cons. It seems that I have to use some time to explore new powers. Chapter 479. After fully understanding the changes in all aspects of his body, Noah opened his eyes, looked at his hands, and smiled bitterly. Although it's not the first time, my physique is really cheating. Pandora said that generally, when a god slayer worked hard to kill a god, they could only get one authority. Noah killed Welleslana and Meckel at the same time. Logically speaking, He should have been able to get 2 authorities, but because of the inexplicable changes in his physique and strength and the power of God that flowed into his body, Noah finally only got 1 authority. Storm, Giant, White Horse, Draconian, Golden Wolf, Priest, Phoenix, Elf, Thunder, and Warrior. What Noah got was the authority to use these 10 avatars. The authority that could use multiple powers generally had strict restrictions. For example, an avatar could only be used once, and after using it, it had to wait for a period of time before it could be used again. It was even possible that there was a limit to how long the avatar could be used. However, because of his physique, Noah absorbed all the power of Lana and Mekhl and merged it with his own power, eliminating all these restrictions. If one thought about it carefully, this was not strange at all. After all, Lana also had the authority to use 10 avatars, and Noah himself did not have these restrictions. If Noah was just an ordinary God-slayer, then usurping the power of God would inevitably cause these powers to have restrictions, but Noah's physique tyrannically absorbed these powers and turned the power of God into his own power. Naturally, there would not be any strange restrictions. Therefore, although it was still authority, the authority of the 10 avatars that were born from the combination of Noah, Lana, and Mekhl's power was no longer the power of God, but Noah's own power. Without those restrictions, the authority of these 10 avatars could be used as 10 authority. No wonder Noah said that this was cheating. However, no matter what, it was a fact that his own power had increased exponentially to a different dimension, and Noah could not be satisfied with this. Noah closed his eyes again, and the outline of the stone plate that connected the 10 avatars appeared in his mind. He clearly understood how strong these 10 avatars were, and his heart was excited. With my current power, if I face Hades again, I will definitely not lose. Noah opened his eyes and raised his hand. A wave of magic lines immediately fluctuated and covered Noah's arm. Even if it's not fused with authority like the Runi magic, my magic bullet and enhanced magic don't have to come into contact with the magic base plate anymore. I can use them completely on my own. This was an extremely good thing. As mentioned before, the power of magic depended on the power in the source. It was a power that had been determined from the beginning. The amount of this power that a magician could use had long been determined. In other words, no matter how much one honed their magic, as long as they reached the limit of the power that had been determined in the source, then no matter how hard the magician tried, there was no way to improve the power of magic. Now, Noah's magic was completely independent. Like the power of Lana and Mekhl that flowed into Noah's body, it had become Noah's own power. It no longer had to be in contact with the magic base, nor was it a power that came from the source. Noah could rely on his own practice to improve the power of his magic, just like the crush magic that he had mastered. And with Noah's magic power that had become even more cheating after becoming a God Slayer, why would he worry about the power of his magic not increasing? In addition to magic and magic, my authority is the embodiment of my true power. I must familiarize myself with authority during this period of time. Just after Noah figured out the various changes in himself and the path he should take in the future, the door of Noah's room was opened. Immediately afterward, Erica, who was wearing a black and red princess dress, and Liliana, who was still wearing blue and black casual clothes, came in from the outside. Perhaps they didn't expect Noah to have woken up. When they saw Noah sitting on the bed, Erica and Liliana were startled at first, then they were surprised at the same time. "You're awake." "I just woke up." Noah also reacted and nodded to Erica and Liliana. "It was you who saved me, right?" "Thank you." Electra and Liliana nodded subconsciously. In the next second, the two girls finally remembered. The man in front of them was no longer just a powerhouse who could block the King of Swords of Italy, but a real God Slayer. The seventh God Slayer in the world had been born. And he was right in front of Erica and Liliana. At that moment, Liliana, who was the first to realize this, suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground, put her right hand on her left chest, and performed the highest knight's salute to Noah. "Please allow Liliana Kranikar to greet you, Your Majesty." As she said that, Liliana glanced at Erica, who was still standing there without any intention of saluting, and frowned slightly. "Erica, don't tell me you're still as willful and reckless as before when you meet the king. How strict." "No matter what, I won't go to that extent. Besides, I'm not being willful and reckless. Knowing how to pay attention to beauty is what a noble lady should have, Lily." Erica shook her head with a wry smile, but still, like Liliana, she knelt on one knee and performed the knight's salute. "Erica Brantery is also here to offer you the highest salute and congratulations, the seventh king." Seeing that even Erica, who was extremely confident in herself and overly concerned about beauty, knelt and saluted him, Noah opened his mouth slightly. But after a moment of hesitation, he finally chose to accept Erica's and Liliana's submission. Erica and Liliana, who thought that Noah would object to their excessive salute because he was not used to it, were surprised at first. Then, they developed a faint admiration for Noah. Why did the relevant people in the magic world treat the God Slayers as kings and serve them? It was not only because the God Slayers had the power that humans could not resist, but also because the God Slayers were the only existences that could fight against the God of Disobedience, who was wreaking havoc all over the world. This was because the God Slayer represented the human race in challenging the God of Disobedience and was able to protect the human race from the hands of the God of Disobedience. Therefore, the human race would respect the God Slayer as their king and also serve the God Slayer voluntarily. As a newly born king, he would subconsciously resist being saluted as a subject, but Noah did not resist. Instead, he accepted it. It was not because Noah really regarded himself as the king of all humans after becoming a God Slayer, but because Noah clearly knew that this identity not only represented status, but also responsibility. Therefore, Noah did not refuse Erica's and Liliana's salute as a subject, which was a tacit admission that he would bear the responsibility of fighting the God of Disobedience and protecting humans from the God of Disobedience. Seeing this clearly, Erica and Liliana admired Noah. "How long have I been unconscious?" Noah asked. "You should be the ones who brought me back, right?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Liliana replied respectfully. "You have been unconscious for 3 whole days. Has it been 3 days?" Noah rubbed his eyebrows and sighed. "I'm sorry for letting you take care of me for so long. No, this is the duty of a knight." Although Erica saluted as a subject, the smile on her face was still as fierce as a female lion's. Of course, we've also reported the entire process of our king's battle against the undefeated war god and the god of the Mediterranean Sea to the magic society we belong to. Salba Lei Ching has already received the news and specially instructed us to contact him immediately after you wake up. That idiot. Noah sighed again. Knowing that I succeeded in killing the god, that battle maniac should be unable to hold back anymore, right? With such a sentence, the corners of Noah's mouth gradually curled up. Well, it's time to get back the capital and interest. Chapter 480. Yo! Noah! I've heard about it. I didn't expect you to fight 2 of the highest level gods before you even became one of my kind. You're so lucky. On the other side of the phone, Tony's frivolous and somewhat excited voice reverberated loudly in Noah's ears, causing Noah to involuntarily move the phone a certain distance away. Noah narrowed his eyes and said to Tony on the other end of the phone in an extremely annoyed tone. Under normal circumstances, this kind of situation should be said to be bad luck, right? You're at it again. Why are you being so polite? Tony seemed to be a little excited. To be able to fight two of the highest level gods at once, that kind of thing is something that can't be asked for. If it were me, I would be so excited that I wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. You said it was you. Sorry, I'm definitely not the same as you in this regard, Noah retorted without holding back. Also, if this kind of situation happened after becoming a god slayer, it would be fine. But I met those two before I became a god slayer. If it weren't for my good luck, I would have died a long time ago. To be able to successfully kill a god and become a god slayer, it was basically luck. Noah didn't know how many times he had heard this sentence in the past few days since he came to this world. But when Noah really killed a god and recalled the whole process, he finally understood how accurate this sentence was. For example, Noah was able to successfully use the Black Tea King to steal Wellislana's white horse because of Wellislana's carelessness, underestimation, and luck. Another example was that he was able to perfectly buy the time to activate the fairy sphere. It was also because Mekl did not want to be outdone and wrestled with Bo. He even pressed Wellislana under him. Otherwise, Mekl could have turned into lightning and escaped Bo's control. Then, under the attack of the spatial turbulence, the fairy sphere was able to survive and protect Noah from being affected by the spatial turbulence. At the same time, luck played a part in it. In the end, if Erica and Liliana hadn't arrived at the scene in time, Noah would have fallen into the sea and drowned. Wasn't this luck? With all these factors added together, Noah was finally able to kill two of the highest level gods at the same time. Although Noah's own strength and planning played a key role in this, the element of luck couldn't be ignored. Now that he thought about it, Noah felt like he was being watched over by the world. Tony must have felt it, but his tone was still indifferent. But you still succeeded in the end. It's fine as long as you succeed. Tony's voice on the other end of the phone became a little more excited. Then, you've successfully obtained authority, and 2 at that, right? Hearing that, Noah really wanted to tell Tony that he had only obtained 1 authority, the 10 avatars. However, he could use them as 10 authorities to give this idiot a good beating. But on second thought, if Noah were to really reveal this information, not only would he not be able to explain how he obtained such a cheat-like authority, but if the target was Tony, that battle maniac, he would definitely not be affected. Instead, he would be even happier, right? Do you want to know? Noah gave such an answer. Then why don't you come and try? You're right. Tony's voice became more cheerful. Then I'll wait here for you. Don't let me wait too long. After saying that, Tony hung up the phone, causing a busy tone to come from Noah's phone. That idiot. Noah pursed his lips and passed the phone to Liliana, who was standing beside him. Thank you. Liliana took the phone in silence. Her red lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something. However, Erica beat her to it. Forgive me for being blunt, Your Majesty. Erica looked straight at Noah. Do you really intend to fight Sarbatriking? Looking at Erica's thoughtful eyes, Noah shrugged as if he had seen through what Erica was thinking. I can't help it. After all, we agreed on this beforehand, didn't we? This isn't a wise decision. Liliana took a step forward and looked at Noah with a serious expression. You're the king of godslayers. You should consider the people around you. I think a battle between 2 kings of godslayers will bring great harm to the people around you. I implore you to reconsider, Your Majesty. On the side, although Erica didn't say anything more, it was obvious that she had the same concerns as Liliana. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked such a question. Both Erica and Liliana knew that Noah and Tony had an agreement to fight after Noah became a godslayer. However, Erica and Liliana didn't take it seriously before. Was it that easy to become a godslayer? Compared to Noah successfully killing a god, Erica and Liliana were more inclined to believe that Noah would fail to challenge a god. What they considered was how to deal with the aftermath of Noah's failure, how to deal with the battle between the two gods of disobedience, and how to persuade Tony to rush over. In the end, Noah really succeeded in killing a god and became a godslayer. Naturally, he had to fulfill his agreement with Tony. In this regard, Erica and Liliana, who had spent all their energy thinking about what to do after Noah's failure, had no way to deal with this result. But there was no doubt that if the battle between the two gods of disobedience had the ability to sink an island, then the result of the battle between the two godslayers, even if it was inferior to the former, would still bring about losses that others didn't want to see. Erica and Liliana naturally had to find a way to stop it. At the very least, they had to minimize the losses caused by the battle between the two kings of disobedience. "Don't worry." Noah waved his hand casually. "I'm not stupid enough to start a battle of that level in a place where there are people. No, it's not a matter of whether there are people or not. The loss of buildings is also a loss." Erica and Liliana wanted to say this, but because Noah had fully considered the safety of others, it would be really overboard to ask a king of disobedience for some buildings. Erica and Liliana could only swallow this bitter fruit, and they were already prepared to let the Italian Magic Association bear this loss. Sure enough, the Godslayers were a group of troublemakers. Fortunately, in the battle with Welslana and Meckel, Noah did not suffer any injuries. The reason why he was unconscious for 3 days was entirely due to the changes caused by the conflict between the reincarnation of a Godslayer and the power in his body. Therefore, after waking up, Noah not only did not feel any discomfort in his body, but he also felt quite energetic because of his reincarnation as a Godslayer. It was as if he was ready to fight anytime and anywhere. In this way, Noah naturally had no reason to continue to stay in bed. Accompanied by Erica and Liliana, he left Sardinia that day and arrived in Rome when it was almost dark. Noah wanted to head straight to the hotel where Tony was staying, but almost as soon as he exited the airport, Erica and Liliana called out to him as though they knew it was the right time. "Wait a minute, Your Majesty," Liliana said. "Before meeting you, there is a lord who wants to see you first." Noah suddenly stopped in his tracks. Erica looked at Noah and smiled unhurriedly. "You should have heard of the Sage Council, right?" The full name of the Sage Council was the Sage Council of Greenwich. Noah heard from Andre that this council seemed to collect information about the Godslayers from all over the world and study the power of the Godslayer. They would also name the power of the Godslayer. To put it simply, rather than calling it an organization, it was more like an intelligence center and research facility that specialized in collecting information. However, the objects of the intelligence and research of this Sage Council were not ordinary people, but focused on the Godslayers and the god of disobedience. Since Erica mentioned the Sage Council, most of the people who wanted to see Noah were from the Sage Council. When Noah thought of this, Erica also confirmed Noah's guess. "The former president of the council wants to see you." Chapter 481. The Sage Parliament of Greenwich was different from the Copper and Black Cross and the Bronze and Black Cross. It was not a magic society. At its most extreme, the Sage Parliament was just like a mutual aid society. In the beginning, the Wise Men's Council was just a simple group of members who exchanged knowledge of the occult. If there was a member who had reached a bottleneck in their research, the rest of the members would also lend a helping hand in terms of economics, academics, and so on. Later on, the Wise Men's Parliament set up many independent research institutions one after another. They also set up educational institutions called academies, gaining great authority and creating the unique nature of the Wise Men's Parliament. However, the purpose of the Sage Parliament's existence was not really to study the occult of this world, but to survive. The Sage Parliament was set up in the 19th century during the Victorian era in England. At that time, the most senior of the deicide, who had lived the longest, was also living in the capital of the British Empire, which was developing rapidly. That God Slayer was not a good person. He was even more ridiculous than Tony, who was a battle maniac. He would treat gods as prey to satisfy his own interests. He would also kill at will because of his mood. He treated human life as a joke and was unscrupulous. It was said that such an existence visited Queen Victoria with a playful attitude at that time. In order to protect England and the Queen of England from the threat of the dangerous deicide, the Wise Men's Parliament was officially established to study the deicide. Thus, the nature of the Wise Men's Council continued, creating the existence of the Wise Men's Council that would study the God Slayer. Although the Sage Council was not a magic society, in order to research the God Slayer, the Council of Sages had gathered many people with sufficient power and ability. Among them, the most outstanding was the special advisor of the Sage Parliament, the former speaker with the title of Princess. It was said that the former speaker was an outstanding student, known as Princess. She was the daughter of Duke Gauding. Not only was she a witch with enough spiritual power to brag about, but she was also recommended to be the Speaker of the Sage Parliament when she was only 16 years old. She was extremely knowledgeable. However, later on, for some unknown reason, this person who was known as the Princess stepped down from the position of the chairman and went into seclusion behind the scenes. On the surface, this princess only held the position of special advisor in the Sage Parliament, but in reality, she was still the person with the highest authority in the Sage Parliament. For something as important as the birth of a new God Slayer, the Sage Parliament would definitely receive news of it immediately. But for the princess to personally come out to meet someone is something that has never happened before. As they walked toward the agreed meeting place, Erica mentioned it casually. Presumably, that person should know that the two kings are about to duel in the capital of Italy, so he came to Rome in person, right? Noah could only smile bitterly in his heart as he knew what Erica was implying. It seemed that although the magicians of this world respected the God Slayers as kings, they secretly treated them as if they were dangerous people, which proved the saying, being with a king is like being with a tiger. Noah didn't know what kind of people the rest of the God Slayers were. But judging from Tony's personality, if the God Slayers were all people who lived unscrupulously, it was no wonder that others would treat them as dangerous people. In this regard, Noah naturally wouldn't say anything, nor would he make any promises, nor would he work hard to prove that he was different. He shook his head, ignored Erica's profound remarks, and Liliana, who nodded repeatedly, and walked forward. This also made Erica and Liliana give up persuading him. They were completely silent as they led Noah to the agreed meeting place. Not long after, the three of them arrived at a hotel. Compared to the hotel Tony was currently in, this hotel was not large in scale, giving people a feeling that it was ordinary and unsubstantial. However, as soon as Noah, Erica, and Liliana entered the hotel, a person dressed as a waiter immediately came out and respectfully led the three of them into a room in the hotel. There, a person had already arrived and was quietly waiting for Noah's arrival. "I've been waiting for a long time, Your Majesty." The one who said this was a dignified young lady sitting on a sofa. She looked like a dignified lady. The young lady was wearing a high-class white coat. Underneath the coat was a knitted dress and panties. She wore black boots on her feet. Her bright platinum hair hung softly on her back and slender shoulders. Her entire body exuded an extremely noble temperament. Her temperament was even above Erica's. "I'm Alice Louise of Nifar." The noble young lady stood up. Her every movement had a sense of elegance, but her tone was quite relaxed, giving people the feeling that she was speaking from the bottom of her heart, without any pretense. "Your Majesty, you can just call me Alice." Looking at the scene where Alice still exuded a noble and gorgeous temperament even when she didn't do anything special, Liliana, who had a more serious personality, froze on the spot, not knowing how to react. Erica, on the other hand, had an eager expression on her face, as if she wanted to compete with the young lady with the title of princess in the way of a noblewoman. She wanted to show off her beauty, confidence, and temperament. If it weren't for Noah, she might have actually stepped forward. After all, this was a conversation between the God-Slayer and the former president of the Sage Parliament. Be it in terms of identity, status, or obligation, Erica and Liliana should keep their mouths shut and show enough respect to the king who killed the God-Slayer and the beautiful princess. However, Noah, who was supposed to respond to the princess' greetings, frowned slightly. He glanced at Alice, and after a while, his expression turned to surprise. This feeling. You're not yourself, but an existence like a clone, right? After hearing that, Erica and Liliana were both stunned. Alice was also stunned on the spot, but then she nodded in admiration. As expected of the king who was able to kill two of the highest level, God of Disobedience, before becoming a God Slayer. To be able to see through my true colors at a glance, even the rest of the God Slayers would not be able to do so. You are really amazing. However, this should be called a ghost body. In the world of magic, it can also be called a plasma body. To put it in a very rough way, it is a soul clone created through mental induction. The real me is now sleeping in a bed in London. Alice blinked her eyes mischievously. I'm not being disrespectful to the king, but my body can't support me on such a long journey from London to Rome, so please forgive me, Your Majesty. Upon hearing this, Noah remembered that Alice had stepped down from her position as the president of the Sage Parliament and went into seclusion behind the scenes. Alice looked to be only in her 20s, about the same age as Noah. At this age, girls should be more active, but Alice had stepped down from her position as the president and chose to retire. That should be because of Alice's poor health, right? I don't mind this kind of thing. Noah shook his head and looked at Alice. Compared to this, I'm more concerned about the reason you called me here. There are two reasons. Alice didn't beat around the bush and said with an elegant smile. The first reason is to see what kind of king can kill the two highest level, God of Disobedience, at the same time before becoming a God Slayer. I see. Noah raised his eyebrows. Your Sage Parliament is an organization that specializes in studying God Slayers, so you're here now to test me. No matter what, this is too rude to the king. I naturally won't do such a thing. Alice denied with a smile. Why don't you just take it as a young girl's curiosity at its peak? Noah immediately took a deep look at Alice and curled his lips into a smile. Then, what's the second reason? I believe the king has already guessed it. Alice looked at Noah closely. It's about your duel with Ching. Chapter 482. When Alice stated the second reason for her visit, Erica and Liliana both showed an, as expected, expression. Noah was the only one who felt extremely helpless when he heard that Alice was treating his duel with Tony as a major event. I already said that I would pay attention to the surroundings and not let ordinary people get involved. At most, I'll just destroy some buildings. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Noah naturally didn't think that it was exaggerated. Because this was also considered a good tradition of fairy tale, right? With Makarov as the leader, the magic shooters of fairy tale had always been unscrupulous. Needless to say, the teams of Naz, Gray, Alusha, Lucy, and the others would usually be unable to stop themselves because of some trivial matters when they were on a mission. They would even destroy half of the city where they were on a mission. And Makarov himself treated the council as trouble. Generally, the council's warnings would go in one ear and out the other, and only the especially important parts would be remembered in his heart. Coming from a fairy tale, with such a group of troublemakers, Noah really didn't take one or two buildings seriously. Of course, it wasn't that Noah didn't have common sense, but the trouble brought about by being indecisive during a battle was extraordinarily big, and Noah didn't want to be restrained because of this. After all, Noah was still a relatively strong person. It was fine to be scrupulous about the lives of ordinary innocent people, but if he still had to be scrupulous about not destroying the environment and not damaging the flowers and plants during a battle, then what was the point of fighting? He might as well go home and embroider. This was also the reason why Noah could lure Welslana and Mecca away for the safety of the residents of Sardinia, but could also shatter the uninhabited island and even the space itself for victory. To be precise, this cognition was not wrong. Being overcautious during a battle was obviously courting death. However, from an outsider's point of view, the trouble caused by this was not ordinary. Even the former president of the wise parliament has come to Rome to persuade you. Here, as a king, you should show your magnanimity and listen to our opinions. What do you think? Erica chose the right time to interrupt. After all, this is the capital of Italy. Salbale isn't the type to care about his surroundings when fighting. At this time, we can only hope that the other king is rational. Although I don't want to admit Erica's words, I also think you should consider this point, Liliana said to Noah as though she was advising him. If it's possible, please cancel your duel with Salbat Lei Ching. Noah was silent, but his eyes were fixed on Alice, which made her feel suspicious. Excuse me, is there anything strange about me? It's not like that. Noah suddenly smiled and spread his hands. I'm just thinking that even though the duel between the God-slayers is rare, the God of Disobedience can also bring about the impact of a battle of that level, just like how I killed Welslana and Mecca. And the God-slayers will travel all over the world to deal with the God of Disobedience that appears on the ground and fight with the God of Disobedience. Logically speaking, even if the impact of a battle of this level is great, the frequency of it happening isn't low, right? Noah looked at Alice with a spurious smile. Then, does the former president of the wise parliament stop every battle of this type? Isn't that too busy? Alice held her breath. After hearing Noah's words, Erica and Liliana were also puzzled. Just like what Noah said, the impact of the battle between the God-slayer and the God-slayer, the God-slayer and the God-slayer, and the God-slayer and the God-slayer had almost the same impact, but the number of times it happened was also not small. Under such circumstances, Erica and Liliana had never heard of Princess Alice personally taking action to stop a battle like this. She was indeed too busy. So, this time, why did Princess Alice take action personally? Was it because one of the God-slayers was just born and killed two of the highest-level gods at the same time? Why did she have to come and test the waters? In that case, there was no need to specially create a soul clone when she felt so unwell that she needed to abdicate, right? Alright, Your Highness, you'd better state your purpose. Noah curled his lips. If you want to rely on such flawed persuasion to make me do as you wish, that won't work. This. Alice couldn't help but be at a loss for words and let out a bitter laugh. It seems like the king born this time isn't just an outstanding warrior, but also an incredible tactician. You're overpraising me. I'm not a tactician, but that doesn't mean that I don't know how to use my brain, Noah said with a smile. So, it won't work if you think you can fool me with some petty tricks. You're a princess. Don't tell me you want me to threaten you like a villain before you tell me the truth, right? That feeling of being naughty isn't bad either. It might tempt me a little. Alice's voice became brisk again. Her beautiful eyes met Noah's eyes directly. Actually, Your Majesty's outstanding battle record has attracted some unfriendly people. I heard that you're about to have a duel with Minister Sarbaret, and he seems to have come to Rome, Italy. Not a very friendly person. Noah raised his eyebrows. Princess Alice, Erica took a step forward, and asked. Are you saying that someone wants to harm Your Majesty during the duel between the two kings? Isn't that too stupid? Liliana frowned. They actually want to harm Your Majesty. Could it be an evil organization of magicians? If that's all, I wouldn't have to come here to remind you. Alice shook her head, her gaze still fixed on Noah. I wonder if your majesty has heard of the godly ancestor? Godly ancestor. Noah pondered for a moment. After making sure that he had never heard of this term, he looked at Alice. What's that? It's an existence that was born through reincarnation after the death of Gaia under certain special circumstances. Alice glanced at Liliana. The ancestors of witches and witches like me and Miss Liliana used to serve Gaia. The godly ancestor is the reincarnation of Gaia. It can be said that the witches and witches of modern times can be considered as the distant descendants of the godly ancestor. You mean? Noah asked Alice in an uncertain tone. The person who's secretly watching me is the godly ancestor? I don't know if he's watching your majesty, but I did receive news that he came to Rome after your majesty became the god slayer, Alice said worriedly. Although I don't know if he's watching your majesty, if he's planning something, he'll definitely do something bad during the duel between you and Sarberit. That was why Alice appeared and wanted to stop the duel between Noah and Tony. The godly ancestor. Noah touched his chin. Is he very strong? No, but in terms of strength, the godly ancestor is only at the same level as the mythical beasts. If we use the human level to classify them, they're at the level of the Holy Knight. Even if they're above the Holy Knight level, the difference isn't that great, Alice said. That may be the highest level of enemies for humans, but for a king who kills gods, with a sweep of his authority, even 100 enemies of that level would die in an instant, right? However, the godly ancestor used to be the Gaia of Gaia. There's a seal in her body that allows her to regain the strength and appearance of the Gaia in a short period of time at the cost of her life. She can then transform into the god of disobedience, Alice reminded him. Even your majesty shouldn't underestimate the godly ancestor. I understand what you mean, Noah's eyes flashed, and he said calmly. However, since we can't confirm the purpose of the other party, it's not appropriate to change the schedule suddenly, right? We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Noah stopped Alice, who seemed to want to say something else, and smiled. That smile was slightly cold. No matter what, if you want to do something to me, then be prepared to be bitten in the back. Chapter 484. He would use a period of time to explore his new power, and then come back to fight Tony. This was the first thought that came to Noah when he first reincarnated as a god slayer and realized that his power system had undergone a great change. But after that, Noah found that this idea was a big mistake. Because it was a complete waste of time. The great ritual left behind by Epimetheus and Pandora to reincarnate a human as a god slayer, perhaps because it was too messy, there were many strange problems. On the surface, the god slayer was only similar to human beings, but its nature was actually more similar to that of wild beasts, magical beasts, mythical beasts, and even gods. Naturally, even the rest of its body would be very similar to that of humans. And just like how a beast would not work hard to learn how to bite its prey, it was completely impossible for a god slayer to learn how to do it on the ground. Therefore, the god slayer's authority could only be honed on the battlefield and in actual combat. In other words, as long as he continued to fight, Noah's authority would become stronger and stronger, and the authority would become more and more familiar to him, and naturally, he would be able to practice it. Of course, unlike other god slayers, Noah could not only make his authority stronger and stronger in battle, but also because the ability to limit was integrated into his authority. As long as Noah did not use his authority would enter a state of self-enhancement. However, once he entered a combat state, his authority would become more and more proficient, and he would be able to use it naturally. This was a fact that was true. Therefore, when Tony came in front of Noah with a violent battle intent and curse power, Noah's whole body and mind heated up, and he instantly entered a state of combat. It was at this time that the spirit of language, which made the curse power and power boil, and allowed him to exert more than 120% of his power, suddenly appeared in Noah's mind, and was chanted by Noah. Immediately after that, the methods of using the authority of the 10 avatars of Storm, Giant, White Horse, Draconian, Golden Wolf, Priest, Phoenix, Elf, Thunder, and Warrior emerged from the depths of Noah's memory, including a deeper level of application and ability. Noah did not know that even if he entered a state of combat, it was very illegal to obtain such an exaggerated level of proficiency and use of the authority at the beginning. Logically speaking, when he first became a god slayer, Noah's first battle would at most obtain 2 or 3 avatars to use. It would be too exaggerated to be proficient in all of them at once. However, it was unknown whether it was because of Noah's physique, or because Noah was different from other god slayers, and directly absorbed the power of God and made it his own. Noah was so lucky that he understood how to use his authority well. At this moment, a loud laugh sounded from one of the piles of debris in the huge pit. "You're indeed worthy of being my opponent. You've just become my kind, and you already have such a degree of power. I was right about you." Tony, who was laughing joyfully, pushed away the debris piled on top of him and stood up with a bang. Taking a closer look, Tony was not injured at all in the impact that seemed to be able to destroy the world. This was because nearly 100 cuneiform imprints appeared around Tony as if they were protecting him, and they were slowly fluctuating. Noah recognized those characters. They were the runic characters that originated from Northern Europe. Of course, that was not the runic magic that Noah had mastered before, but the sacred characters that originated from the myths and were mastered and used by the god of magic. That was no longer magic or magic, but the real power of God. The power of authority. In front of him was the huge pit that he created, and behind him was the perfect environment. Standing on the edge of the line, Noah cast his gaze on the cuneiform text on Tony's body, which was the rune text that was fluctuating around Tony. "As you can see, this is my second authority." Tony felt Noah's gaze on him, patted his body and lifted his knight's sword. "Those people from the parliament seem to call it steel protection. It allows me to transform my entire body into steel. No matter if it's weight or hardness, it will be increased to an unimaginable level. With such a body, even that tornado you used just now won't be able to do anything to me. Furthermore, because of the increase in weight, if you were to be hit by my fist, that wouldn't be a joke." Tony laughed. "That's practically immortal." But no one knew it without Tony saying it out loud. As an expert in the field of runic characters, Noah could tell at a glance that the characters surrounding Tony were the steel runic characters. The effect of the characters was similar to the hardened runic characters. Both characters could increase the hardness and weight of the user. However, there were pros and cons when comparing steel and hardened. For example, the steel runic characters could increase the hardness and weight to the level of the toughest steel, but it would also be fixed at the steel level of hardness. On the other hand, the hardened runic characters could be continuously increased. As long as there was enough magic and quantity, it would not be difficult to increase the hardness of steel. However, that was only when compared to the steel runic characters. Moreover, the steel runic characters were at the level of magic. The runic characters on Tony's body were at the level of authority, and there were nearly 100 of them. Perhaps the hardness and weight of his body had reached an extremely terrifying level. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was immortal.